Chapter 1051. Buzz! Buzz! Just as Jun Changshao was discussing the plan, a stream of light suddenly flashed above the alley. A looming array barrier appeared, and then visible ripples spread throughout the city. What is this? Swoosh! Swoosh! The 5 people were inevitably swept by, and then their bodies suddenly flashed red. Jun Changshao's brain turned, and he said in surprise, could it be a locking array? There is an unidentified person in Jinwei City. Catch him! Swoosh! 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 The peaceful city was suddenly bustling with noise and excitement. Armored soldiers flew out from the city towers and city walls one after another, with their swords drawn and bows drawn, rushing towards the alley where the 5 beams of light were shining. How was this catching? It was simply taking their lives. Anyone who dared to break into the city without identification would end up dead. No way! Jun Changshao collapsed. This array also has the function of detecting identity. Yi Xingqian and He Wudi were overjoyed. Since they were discovered in the city, they could take action directly. The patriarch's previous suggestion of disguising as a woman to obtain information was no longer necessary. Patriarch! Li Qingyang turned his head and frowned. We are exposed, what should we do now? Speaking of this, he took a step back in shock. Jun Changshao's hair was combed into a swept-back hairstyle, wearing dazzling sunglasses, and a cigar in his mouth. He said, then we can only fight. The system collapsed, so what this guy said before, don't be impulsive no matter what you do. A little impatience will spoil great plans. He is completely fooling us. Huff huff. Huff huff huff. Yi Xingqian unleashed his cultivation and stepped into the air. Swoosh! The 3-feet-long sword flew out of the sheath, and the sky was filled with sword shadows instantly rippling over the dark city. Poochie! Poochie! Wherever the sword light passed, blood splattered. Swish! Yi Xingqian floated on the roof, and more than 10 drops of blood gathered at the tip of the sword. Plop! Plop! The dozen or so soldiers who had rushed over from afar all had their heads tilted as they fell to the ground, dead. From the beginning to the end, they did not see what the flowing light was. They only felt a chill on their necks, and their brains and bodies were instantly disconnected. Under the moonlight, Yi Xingqian said proudly, when dealing with trash, just kill it. Dressing up as a woman is simply stupid. Hoo-hoo! Hoo-hoo! All of a sudden, dozens of soldiers rushed over from the left and right. All kinds of energy converged and shot out. Buzz! Buzz! Yi Xingqian's spirit energy spread out as he executed inverse the universe. 2 mirror-like 8 trigrams appeared. Swish! Swish! All kinds of energy came from the sides and instantly merged into the pattern. Then, they were transferred to other directions and blasted on the street. Boom! Xiao Ziji clenched his fists and abruptly clasped them together. Whoosh! Whoosh! The already damaged street suddenly cracked. Earth pillars shot up one after another, and then all the soldiers who were attacking Yi Xingqian were sent flying. After a short fight, the charging soldiers immediately realized the strength of the unknown person, so they stopped and gathered their spirit energy in their hands. Powerful longbows appeared out of thin air, and then they knocked special arrows. However, just as they were about to pull the bowstring, they suddenly felt a gust of wind from the side. He Wudi hovered nearby, leaning and crossing his arms. He smiled and said, "You are not a hero when you attack in the dark. How dare you, thief! Die!" 2 Peak Martial King soldier leaders flew over from afar and slashed down with their battle axes. Swish! Swish! 2 powerful saber lights slashed down from above. He Wudi was still smiling. It was not until the saber lights touched the center of his eyebrows that he suddenly froze. His black hair was gradually blown away. Be human. The most important thing is to be happy. Bang bang! The saber aura that was close to his face was broken, and the 2 soldiers who were pressing down were instantly sent flying. He Wudi opened his hands, and rays of 7 mysteries glow shot out rapidly, directly injuring the bow-wielding soldiers to the ground. Hiss hiss hiss. On the city tower, dozens of fully armed Pegasi flapped their wings and flew over. The soldiers riding on them were all martial kings. Whoosh! Yi Xingqian dragged a stream of light and flew over quickly, instantly fighting with the troops. Wherever the sword light passed, heads, corpses, and limbs flew everywhere. Blood even splashed on the camera. Whoosh! 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 A large number of soldiers emerged from the city tower, the city, and even the many courtyards. They marched toward the battlefield, and the number of people increased from a few hundred to thousands and even tens of thousands. Looking down from the sky, the 4 disciples of the sect of all times seemed to have activated their unparalleled mode and started a crazy slaughter in Chang and city. Whoosh whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! All kinds of energy burst out, and the soldiers and warhorses flew in all directions in slow motion. This kind of CG-like battle scene was extremely hot-blooded. It also indirectly proved that the strongest sect of all times was hot-blooded. It was just unintentionally classified as a comedy. Strange. Jun Changshao sat on the highest point of the city tower and said, "The battle outside is so loud. Why didn't the people living here come out to watch the show?" Whoosh whoosh whoosh. He was wearing the true Yang suit, and the red cloak danced with the special effect of the return of the great sage. Under the contrast of the night, the level of acting tough had increased by many levels. Also, Jun Changshao looked straight ahead, at the forbidden palace that seemed to be isolated by some kind of power, and asked in confusion, "Is Emperor Jinwei hugging his concubine to sleep?" Buzz! Buzz! At this moment, streams of light flashed outside the forbidden palace. A light shadow appeared behind Yi Xingqian at an extremely fast speed and threw a palm attack, saying, "Die, brat!" Boom! Energy exploded above the street. Whoosh! Yi Xingqian fell awkwardly on the ruins of a broken building, his eyes flashing with anger. The old man who attacked was surprised because not only did he miss his target, but he was also stopped by a young man in armor. "Old man." Jun Changshao grabbed his wrist and said with a cold glare, "You want to kill this king's disciple? You're dreaming." Whoosh whoosh. The aura of the sword and martial sages suddenly burst out, like 2 ancient beasts erupting from their bodies. Seeing this, the half-saint expert was so shocked that his scalp almost exploded. "No!" Bang! Jun Changshao threw a punch, and the fist that carried the supreme love of the patriarch hit the old man's chest fiercely. His whole body flew out of the city like a cannonball, and finally hit the mountain and died on the spot with his head tilted. Whoosh! 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 Outside the forbidden palace, streams of light flashed frequently. In an instant, 20 half-saint-level martial artists appeared out of thin air. They were slightly different from the previous old man. Their eyes flashed red, and there was no expression on their faces. The same thing was that their overall strength seemed to be relatively weak. It should be forcibly promoted instead of being cultivated on the ground. Puppets? Jun Changshao frowned. Boom! Boom! At the rear, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and others did not stop. They continued to use Xu Wei Wuyang's unparalleled sword to harvest the attacking soldiers. "Young master." Elder Lin, who was rushing through the night, said, "I heard that Jinwei City is heavily guarded. Can we sneak in with this identity?" "No problem," Yuan Gongzi said proudly. Then he looked in the direction of Jinwei City and said with great expectation, "This city will definitely let me make a comeback and achieve success." Jun Changshao, Jun Changshao. You made me lose the Demon Emperor's Gate, but you gave me a high position in the future. How should I thank you? Under the night. A small half of Jinwei City. Under the unscrupulous battle of Li Qingyang and the other 3, it had been severely damaged, and the scope of the impact was still spreading to other areas. According to the speed of Yuan Gongzi and Elder Lin, the battle did not stop during the period. Well, when they arrived at their destination, they should still be able to see the complete ruins of the city. Chapter 1052. The system was very depressed now. Because the host said that he wanted to keep a low profile at first, but after being discovered, he directly fought in Jinwei City. This was not normal after all. Jun Changxiao's initial strategy was to keep a low profile, but the security in Jinwei City was too strict, and there was a formation to check his identity at night. Since he could not avoid it, he might as well fight. With his saint cultivation, he was not afraid of Emperor Jinwei, whose strength was unknown. Now that he saw that those who appeared in the imperial palace were nothing more than half-saints who were forcibly promoted, he did not take them seriously. However, what puzzled Go Sheng was that there might be another reason why Emperor Jinwei did not appear when his disciple was so fierce in the city. But at least there was an expert like Wu Xing guarding the city. Why didn't he come out? Or, the method of forcibly promoting cultivation could only promote half-saints. Was there no expert like Wu Sheng in the Jinwei Empire? The system said, based on the overall strength of heaven and earth attributes in fisheries state of the East Sea, the probability of nurturing an expert like Wu Sheng is only 1 in 10 million. How did you figure it out? Colonel Ki. Damn it, you are poisonous. What is the probability of nurturing an expert like Wu Sheng in Yangzhou in the southwest? At least 1 in 100 million. The system added, over the years, according to my analysis, except for the 2 overseas provinces that I have never been to, Yangzhou in the southwest has the lowest probability of nurturing an expert like Wu Sheng. Jun Changxiao covered his chest and said, "You want to say that there is no worse place in the place where I live, only worse?" Yes. The silent blade stabbed his heart again. However, the system changed the topic. The host's arrival has greatly increased the probability of nurturing an expert like Wu Sheng in Yangzhou in the southwest. As my cultivation continues to improve, the probability will steadily increase. This was a reasonable sentence, which made Jun Changxiao feel a little warm. Swish! 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 While talking, 20 half-saints rushed over from the left and right sides, their eyes flashing red, and all kinds of spiritual power burst out unscrupulously. Jun Changxiao frowned slightly. There were many residents in the city who deliberately suppressed their power to avoid hurting the innocent people, but they did not hold back at all. The system said, "Puppet stone hammer." Hoo-hoo. Jun Changxiao spread out his hands, and the flames in the sky blossomed like fireworks. Then, they turned into 2 large flaming palms that grabbed at the incoming energy and easily crushed it. These people's eyes are glowing red. They must have been imparted to them by the great emperor. Therefore, the equivalent exchange for their rapid cultivation is that they are controlled and lose their self-awareness. Then the controller must be Emperor Jinwei. Not bad. Boom. 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 While Jun Renjie was conversing with Shi Yuanfang, he had already flashed in front of several half-step saints. Under the eruption of his flaming fist, he directly sent these half-step saints flying out of the city. This was to prevent them from landing on the ground and injuring innocent people. Whoosh! Whoosh! In contrast to his benevolence, the half-saints of the Jinwei Empire once again condensed a powerful move. They didn't know how to suppress it at all. The power formed by the roar of psionic power instantly shattered several rows of houses below. This kind of crazy behavior that didn't care about the people and didn't care about life at all. Boom 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 boom. Jun Changxiao rushed over with flames. His fists frequently bombarded in midair. One by one, the half-step saints flew out like cannonballs and finally all fell outside the city. Kill! 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 More and more soldiers appeared from all directions in the city. They were either riding on Pegasi or galloping, gathering in the streets and alleys. Outside the city, more and more soldiers rushed over like a tide and completely sealed off the 4 city gates in the east, west, south, and north. Swish swish swish. The general waved his long sword, and 100,000 soldiers outside the city lined up in a line. They raised their strong bows, and arrows with shining arrowheads stretched the strings open. Looking down from the sky, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers inside and outside the Jinwei city. Jun Changshao and his 4 disciples seemed to be trapped in an inescapable net. Boom! Boom! Xiao Zui was already charging forward like a raging bull. After sending dozens of pegasi and soldiers flying, he used his spiritual sense to scan the 100,000 archers outside the city. Stunned, he said, "Aren't they afraid of damaging the city?" "Lunatics." Li Qingyang said, "A bunch of lunatics. Those flashing arrows definitely contain some kind of explosive power. If they used it without scruples in their own territory, even if they hurt the enemy, wouldn't it bring irreparable damage?" There were many ancient buildings in the Jinwei city with ingenious workmanship. If they were destroyed by arrows, it would really be a loss to the world and the world of architecture. I really don't believe that these people dare to destroy their own home when they are ruthless. Jun Changshao said lightly. The bandits are causing chaos and endangering the palace. Outside the city, a general wearing heavy armor rode on a Pegasus. He pulled out his sword and shouted, "Divine Bow Unit, get ready." Swish 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 swish. 100,000 soldiers raised their bows, and the light gathered on the arrowheads became brighter and brighter. Obviously, they had reached the point where they had to shoot. Fuck! Jun Changshao said in surprise, "They really dare to play." The soldiers who were about to rush up in the city retreated after hearing the general's shout. In an instant, the picture presented was that Jun Changshao, Li Qingyang, and others were hanging over a certain area of Jinwei city. There was no enemy around, and below was a dense residential area. There was a murderous aura in the air. The camera turned to the outside of the city again. 100,000 soldiers were lined up in a row. Their eyes flashed coldly. They didn't care that once the arrows were released, it would hurt a large number of buildings and residents in the city. Jun Changshao said indifferently, "Since they dare to play, then come on." His own people didn't know how to care for their own people, so he, an outsider, naturally wouldn't care. "Release the arrows." The general finally gave the order. There was no emotion in his voice. It seemed that in his eyes, as long as the enemy that threatened the palace was destroyed, it didn't matter what price he had to pay. Swish! 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 Hundreds of thousands of arrows were shot out. Because the rhythm of the arrows was the same, it was like a long sword light, cutting through the Milky Way and sweeping over. The power of a single arrow may be average, but the power of 100,000 arrows was abnormally explosive. Jun Changshao saw that once people were ruthless, they really dared to tear down their own home. Buzz! At the palace, a stream of light flashed into the sky, forming a rather thick defensive barrier. Jun Changshao gave a thumbs up and said, "Protect the palace well and treat the people as targets. It's really better for me to betray the world than to let the world betray me." Swish 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 swish. The arrow rain flew over with great momentum. Li Qingyang, Xiao Zuiji, and the others didn't take it to heart, because they had many ways to avoid the rain of arrows. At this critical moment, the room below was pushed open. Several children of different ages rushed out and stood in front of the ruined room, crying, "Dad, Mom." Their mother was on the verge of death. Bricks, beams, and other debris pressed against her body, but she held on tightly to the infant in her arms. Jun Changshao's heart seemed to be pierced. Then, he floated down and squatted in front of the crying children. He put his hands on their little heads and smiled gently like a big brother next door. "Little guys, nothing will happen to you." Buzz buzz buzz. The ruins gradually floated up. Li Qingyang's face showed the most brilliant smile, because he didn't expect that the patriarch would save the couple who were unrelated to him. No! The patriarch had a kind heart. He was just pretending to be cold. Ta! Xiao Ziji landed and stepped on the ground. His hands suddenly opened, and the earth attribute and the great desolation power in his body erupted. He instantly poured into his palms and slammed them on the ground. Boom boom boom. The well-developed streets quickly broke apart, and earth walls protruded out, instantly flying into the sky and connecting together, like a great wall blocking the area of 100,000 arrows. Floating debris. Jun Changxiao's hands were on the children's heads. Xiao Ziji's defensive power erupted. The earth walls were suspended in the air to block the flowing light arrows. The scene presented in the camera was very warm. At this moment, the soldiers of Jinwei City even dared to tear down their own homes. The disciples of the sect of all times even dared to protect their opponents' homes. Chapter 1053. When Jun Changxiao saw the couple in the ruins using their own bodies to protect their baby, he was deeply moved. The greatest thing in the world was the love of parents. It wasn't sentimental or long-winded. I just want to save them. I just don't want innocent people to die in the hands of my own people. After witnessing the sect master rescue the trapped couple, Xiao Zui landed on the ground and released his earth elemental power and the power of the Great Desolation. He created a thick earth elemental wall to protect the residents of the city from everything. Jun Changxiao didn't give any orders, but his disciple did the right thing at the right time. This was the tacit understanding between master and disciple. This was the tacit understanding of the sect of all times. Shio shio shio. Shio shio shio. Hundreds of thousands of arrows were shot, carrying explosive power. On the path, the earth wall exploded with a thick defensive power. At this time, if there were any onlookers, they would definitely be confused because they wouldn't be able to tell who was the aggressor and who was the defender. As far as the current situation was concerned, the Jinwei Empire's army was the invading party, and the Eternal Sect's disciples were the defending party. The plot was seriously wrong. At this moment, Yuan Gongzi and Elder Lin were still on their way. Boom! 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 Tens of thousands of arrows of flowing light slammed into the thick earthen wall, causing many spots to blossom. Huff huff! Strong airflow wantonly filled the air. However, after being bombarded by dizziness, Xiao Ziji stood still and raised his head, grinning. The earth wall in the sky was strengthened by the desolation force and could be said to be indestructible. After being bombarded, not even a trace was left. This. The Divine Bao unit leader was stunned. Shua! He waved his sword again and shouted, "Ready the arrows." If the first time wasn't enough, then he would do it a few more times. As long as the bandits were eliminated, the safety of the palace would be guaranteed. This guy's eyes didn't flicker with red light, so he probably didn't receive any training. However, he ignored the lives in the city. It seemed like he had crazy worship for the Ah continent. Xiao, when the hundreds of thousands of archers took out their arrows, 2 red and orange lights pierced through the city wall in an arc, peng peng peng. As the light swept past, over 1,000 soldiers' helmets were pierced through. Woody stood at a corner of the city wall and said coldly, "Ignoring your own people and wantonly shooting arrows, is this what a soldier who guards his home should do? Fire! Release the arrows!" Swish! Before the Divine Bao unit leader could finish his words, Yi Xingqian had already appeared behind him. The True Yang's sword slashed across his neck, and his head flew off as fresh blood spurted out. Their commander had been killed. The soldiers were out of their wits. Scram! Yi Xingqian pointed his sword into the distance and said coldly, "Hoo-hoo!" An immense pressure erupted from his body, instantly eroding nearly 100,000 soldiers. The bows and arrows in their hands fell to the ground, and they had the urge to kneel and kowtow. Inside the city, the 100,000 archers were suppressed to the point that they had no combat power left. The soldiers who had retreated rushed forward again, but just as they were about to move, they froze on the spot in fear. Buzz buzz buzz. Pieces of collapsed ruins, bricks, gravel, mud, and even beams gradually floated up and hung in the air. The children's eyes were wide open. Standing in front of them, their big brother, who was even more beautiful than their big sister, was smiling at them. 2 streams of weird energy gradually appeared around him, which looked very gorgeous. Jun Changxiao rubbed the 2 children's little heads and said, "Remember, The purpose of martial arts is to protect your family, not to hurt them. The children couldn't understand this sentence, but it was deeply imprinted in their hearts. Even when they grew up and entered their old age, they would always remember it. Whoosh! Jun Changshao stood up and slowly rose up under the cover of the light. Under the control of the sword and the martial arts, the gravel and other objects floating in the air were gradually crushed into powder and then drifted away with the wind. The residents in the ruins who were injured due to the battle all endured the pain and looked at the man who rose up like a star. They suddenly had a feeling that the heavy objects that were oppressing them were cleared by him. God? No, no, no. In the fishery state of the East Sea and even the entire falling star continent, there was only one God, and that was Emperor Jinwei. Jun Changshao hovered in the air while hundreds of thousands of soldiers gathered below him. They didn't charge toward him mindlessly, as the aura this man was exuding was no weaker than the God in their hearts. Emperor Jinwei. Jun Changshao looked at the imperial palace enshrouded in defensive spell formations with a sharp gaze and said in a solemn voice, "Are you still hiding inside and watching your subjects die in battle?" Whoosh! Whoosh! Space trembled. A middle-aged man in golden armor with a crown on his head stepped out, exuding a powerful aura of a king. Whoosh! Whoosh! The hundreds of thousands of soldiers all knelt down and yelled in unison, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Jun Changshao asked in a cold voice, "You're Emperor Jinwei?" "That's right." Emperor Jinwei's voice was as loud as a bell. On the city gate tower, Yixingchen wiped his blood-stained sword and said in a cold voice, "You look like you're asking for a beating." He had no intention of beating him up because the patriarch was here, so he didn't need to do anything. Brat! A hint of anger flashed through Emperor Jinwei's eyes, and he asked in a solemn voice, "Who are you? Why have you come to my territory to stir up trouble?" He didn't think that someone who dared to stir up trouble in his imperial palace was someone from the three empires, as they didn't have the ability to do so. Jun Changshao, Patriarch of the Sect of all times in the Qingyang County of the southwestern Yangzhou. Jun Changshao reported his name, address, and identity. As he spoke, the aura of a sect leader erupted from his body, and it wasn't any weaker than Emperor Jinwei's aura of an emperor. Go Sheng, who had always been a playboy, was quite imposing when he got serious. In fact, in the eyes of the soldiers and residents, it was as if he had the same status as their god. Southwestern Yangzhou? Emperor Jinwei said in a solemn voice, "So you're from the continent." Because he rarely interacted with the Kingdom of the Nine States, he didn't know that the Sect of all times was a sect that was on par with any top-tier sect. This was very normal. If he had heard of Jun Changshao and this new sect, he would have definitely entered the planar battlefield with the other powerful beings. Strictly speaking, the Eastern Ocean Fisheries State and the other two states that had split off still belonged to the Falling Star continent, but they were more like independent planes. Jun Changshao said calmly, "Your subordinates disregarded the lives of the people and wantonly attacked the city with arrows. As their master, not only did you not stop them, you even sat in the imperial palace and watched the battle. Aren't you afraid that you'll disappoint them?" Emperor Jinwei raised his head and laughed loudly before sweeping his gaze across the soldiers and citizens kneeling on the ground. "Tell him, are you displeased? Your Majesty's achievements are in the present, and the benefits are in the future." The soldiers and citizens yelled, "We're willing to sacrifice our lives for you." Jun Changshao fell silent. It looked like these people had been severely brainwashed. "Jun Patriarch, do you hear me?" Emperor Jinwei asked proudly. Whoosh! He waved his hand and pointed at Jinwei City, then at the mountains and rivers outside. "Ever since I ascended the throne, I've been developing the power of the empire and making it the most powerful empire in the Eastern Ocean Fisheries State. Who wouldn't be proud of this? So, this is the reason why you treat your people like dirt?" Jun Changshao asked calmly. Emperor Jinwei said, "I've given them a luxurious life and a high status. They must be prepared to sacrifice themselves for me. These soldiers aren't the ones who've gone crazy." Jun Changshao shook his head. "You're the one who's gone crazy. Only a crazy person can save an empire. Only a crazy person can make the Jinwei Empire what it is today, or even better. Jun Changshao could tell from every word that Emperor Jinwei said that he was very proud of himself for bringing a weak empire to its current state. He even claimed that he was omnipotent. How arrogant! Jun and the others conceded defeat. I'm afraid that even if you can save it, you can also destroy it with your own hands. Jun Changshao waved his hand, and the Jade Dragon asks the Heaven's Sword appeared out of thin air. He said calmly, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. Hurry up and hand over Master Fan. Master Fan? Emperor Jinwei sneered. So you're here to save that stubborn old man? At this moment, Yuan Gongzi and Elder Lin were still on their way. Chapter 1054. Master Fan. The state preceptor stood in the palace. His face changed when he heard Jun Changxiao's words. Although the secrets of heaven couldn't be revealed, some people with special abilities could rely on various methods to predict the future and even turn misfortune into fortune. The state preceptor didn't have such an ability at the moment, but he had immersed himself in the art of deduction for hundreds of years. He could predict the future and deduce simple fortune and misfortune. During this period, he had been working hard on research. Although he couldn't determine what the omen was, he roughly understood that it was related to Master Fan and a person. Today, Jun Changxiao's brain shook Wei Wei City and asked the emperor for Master Fan. Wasn't it in line with all the deductions? Wasn't it that person? The state preceptor had deduced that Jinwei Empire would have many disasters, but they were eventually saved by the emperor. But this time, the crisis was unprecedentedly strong. No matter how he divined, the answer was a dead end. The crisis was coming. The disaster was coming. Your Majesty! The state preceptor hurriedly shouted, this person is the omen that will bring disaster to my Jinwei Empire. Oh? Jinwei Emperor's eyes gradually turned cold, and he said coldly, then you are my enemy. Jun Changshao could see that this guy wanted to fight, so he pointed to the distance. Go outside. Whoosh, the space shook and disappeared into thin air. The system was speechless. Is this the host's home ground or someone else's? He's worried about affecting the innocent, so he took the initiative to change the location. Whoosh! Jinwei Emperor also disappeared into thin air. Wu Sheng! He Woody frowned. Moreover, from the way he traveled through space, he was probably not an ordinary person. He said solemnly, I'm afraid this is a strong enemy of the host. Yi Xingqian didn't say anything and hurriedly flew out of the city. No wonder he didn't like Jinwei Emperor but didn't personally teach him a lesson. It turned out that, even if he saw through it, he didn't say it out loud. Everyone was still friends. The state preceptor hurriedly left. He didn't know whether the emperor could solve this crisis or not. However, for safety reasons, he must bring Master Fan here as soon as possible. Perhaps he could find a chance to survive. 1,000 miles away from Jinwei City, on a mountain. Jun Changshao stood proudly, the Jade Dragon asks the Heaven's Sword in his hand flickering with a sharp light. Emperor Jinwei raised his right hand, and the void gradually twisted as a thick and heavy sword appeared. From the hilt to the body of the sword, the entire sword was made of gold, and there was a lifelike dragon engraved on it. Dragon Power Sword. After Emperor Jinwei ascended the throne, he used all kinds of ores to forge weapons. This sword followed him on the battlefield and made contributions. It could be said to be a testimony to the prosperity of the Jinwei Empire and a symbol of supreme power. Fan. Jun Changshao glanced at the words engraved on the hilt of the sword and said, this sword should have been forged by Master Fan. Not bad. Emperor Jinwei said proudly, this dragon power sword was forged by Master Fan with the help of dozens of master blacksmiths. It was forged with the fire of the earth's core in 3 years. It can be called the King of Swords. So awesome. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, if you knew my other nickname, you wouldn't have brought out Master Fan's weapon. Emperor Jinwei said, what nickname? Jun Changshao said with a serious expression, I specialize in destroying the weapons forged by Master Fan. I am a handsome young man who has been loved by all for 100 years. You made your sword sound so awesome. As a rising star in the acting tough world, how could I face the late Sect leader if I didn't boast about my nickname? So, Emperor Jinwei said calmly, your weapon is stronger than the Master Blacksmith Fan Yezi? Jun Changshao said, Master Fan's weapon can only be shattered in front of my weapon. Go Sheng was also very arrogant. When two arrogant people met, there would definitely be sparks of love. Emperor Jinwei raised the dragon power sword and said with a cold gaze, I would like to see how strong you are today. Whoosh whoosh. The sword aura appeared and shook the space. This person, He Wudi, who had rushed over, saw this and said in shock, is a sword saint. Jun Changshao was very surprised and said, you are the sword saint and martial saint. Jun Patriarch. Emperor Jinwei sneered and said, in this world, you are not the only one who cultivates both sword and martial arts. Jun Changshao, who didn't take it seriously at first, had a serious expression on his face. After all, it was the first time he had encountered a powerful opponent who also cultivated both sword and martial arts. Wasn't this level the final boss to appear? Since he encountered one so quickly, did it mean that he was about to pass the checkpoint of the Eastern Sea Fishery State? Thinking back on the journey here, he didn't even fight a small boss and directly fought a big boss. The pace was a bit fast. Jun Changshao. Emperor Jinwei held the giant sword with one hand and poured a vast amount of spiritual energy into it. He smiled coldly and said, you have such a cultivation at such a young age. You can be considered a first-rate genius on the continent. Why don't you help me build my career? Jun Changshao said with a smile, you are the second person to recruit me. The first person was still on his way here on horseback and was still a bit far from Jinwei City. And the result? He was tortured by me and became autistic. If Yuan Gongzi was present, he would definitely cry out, I didn't become autistic. I pulled myself together again. Emperor Jinwei shook his head and said, if a talented person can't be used by me, the result can only be, whoosh. The dragon power sword suddenly appeared in front of Jun Changshao, carrying a vast amount of spiritual energy, directly tore through space and slashed down. He said coldly, die. The word die completely merged with the power of the sword. The aura of a king reached its peak, causing the soldiers and civilians in the city to kowtow and cheer. Ding, the crisp sound of weapons colliding was accompanied by sparks in the air. Boom! Jun Changshao fell from the sky like a cannonball. His feet landed firmly on the ground, and an area of several hundred meters with him as the center instantly caved in. Whoosh! 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 Emperor Jinwei in the sky swung his sword. The golden sword energy tore through space and pressed down, interweaving into an inescapable net. The power of the sword was extremely vast. He Wudi and Yixingchen, who were watching the battle from afar, frowned and said, this guy who calls himself an emperor is really not easy to deal with. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Jun Changshao, who was standing below, executed the Ling Jian Divine Arts one-word speed technique. Countless sword energy rained down on the sky like a rain of swords. Boom boom boom. The two extremely powerful sword energies collided violently in the air. The sword might that spread out ruthlessly tore through space. In a short period of time, space was torn into strips like a piece of cloth. Emperor Dragon Sword Art. Emperor Jinwei roared angrily. The dragon power sword shone with a golden light, and the dragon engraved on it seemed to come alive. Then, with a burst of energy, it roared fiercely. Pang! Jun Changshao stomped on the ground and raised his sword with both hands. His entire body was enveloped in sword light, and with a whoosh, he charged forward. The battle between the two sword saints was a fierce competition in the way of the sword. The funds used for special effects were burning crazily every second. Boom! High in the sky, Jun Changshao, who was one with the sword, directly rushed through the mouth of the golden dragon sword energy. A powerful explosion suddenly occurred, and waves of sword energy rippled wildly. This is too shocking. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji were dumbfounded. Although Yi Xingqian and He Wudi could still remain calm, from a professional point of view, the scene brought by the short battle between the two sword saints and martial saints was not inferior to the confrontation between the top-level martial saints. The soldiers and citizens of Jinwei City were stunned. Emperor Jinwei was the strongest god in their hearts. Now, a martial artist from the mainland could actually be on par with him. This was really unimaginable. The emperor did not show his power. That guy named Jun Changshao would definitely be defeated. Hiss! A few hundred miles away, Yuan Gongzi reined in his horse and stopped. Seeing the sword momentum rippling in the distant sky, he said in surprise, "What's going on?" "Young master." Elder Lin stared and said, "It's Jun Changshao." Boom! Yuan Gongzi was struck by lightning. He held his head with both hands and shouted sadly, helplessly and desperately, "Why is he always in the places I go?" Swish! At this moment, Elder Lin flew up and quickly arrived in front of him. He grabbed his collar with one hand and frantically retreated. As soon as he stepped away, the two horses behind him were directly cut into 8 pieces by the remaining power of the sword. This was still a few hundred miles away. In the dozens of miles area where Jun Changshao and Emperor Jinwei fought, not only was the ground caved in, but the towering trees and boulders had also been torn apart. The scene could be described as tragic. Chapter 1055. 1,000 miles away from Jinwei City. The space was torn apart like a piece of cloth. It could be described as a tragic scene. Whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh. High up in the sky, Jun Changshao and Great Emperor Jinwei were hundreds of feet apart. Heavy sword momentum gathered around their bodies as they stood opposite each other. Judging from the battle just now, it seemed that they were evenly matched. Although this Great Emperor Jinwei is also a sword and martial saint, he is still a little weaker than Patriarch in terms of sword momentum. He should have used some kind of special secret technique to forcefully increase his strength. He Wudi commented. Yi Xingqian was silent. This guy really knows more than me. What is his background? What is his identity? Speaking of which, Jun Changshao also relied on various kinds of aptitude liquids to increase his strength. He didn't even comprehend the sword Dao during the whole process. Why didn't he feel that it was fake? It was very simple. This guy's cheat level was very high. Great Emperor Jinwei's right hand that was holding the sword stretched slightly and said coldly, "Jun Patriarch's sword Dao is extraordinary. This emperor quite admires you." Same here. Although the two were praising each other, they maintained absolute focus because the battle had just begun. There would be more intense battles later. Swish! Swish! Sure enough, after a short conversation, both sides once again turned into sword lights and fought crazily in midair. The battle process was hard to describe. Only from the ripples that spread out, it was extremely strong. Young master. Elder Lin, who was hiding thousands of miles away, said in disbelief, that golden-armored martial artist referred to himself as this emperor. He might be the one we are going to seek refuge with. Great Emperor Jinwei. Pfft. Yuan Gongzi couldn't help but spurt out blood. He had traveled thousands of miles across the sea to reach his destination, but he had met Jun Changshao before he had even reached his destination. Jun Changshao had even saved his life, and after much difficulty, he had decided to seek refuge with the ambitious Emperor Jinwei. That guy was evenly matched with him. God! Did you deliberately send Jun Changshao to torture me? Or is it that no matter what I, Yuan Feng, do in this life, I will be bullied and trampled by that guy until I achieve nothing and live in his shadow forever? Boom! An explosion sounded from afar as Great Emperor Jinwei crashed to the ground with a faint sword mark on his golden armor. Jun Changshao stood proudly in midair and said indifferently, "You are the only opponent that I have not lost to in over 100 moves since I came into contact with the sword Dao." Very arrogant. How arrogant. Whoosh! Emperor Jinwei flew over and patted his slightly damaged armor. He sneered coldly, as expected, there's always someone better than you. However, he gripped the dragon power sword tightly and said, this emperor has a rough understanding of your strength. The only thing left for you now is to face death. Shua! Raising his hand, Zhang Xian gathered the momentum of his sword. Buzz buzz buzz. Within the city, the swords on the soldiers' backs and grips trembled violently, and then flew into the air uncontrollably. Swish! 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 100,000 sharp swords flew in unison, forming a one shape above the city, displaying a majestic aura. Jun Changshao frowned and said, it's very similar to my 10,000 swords returned to origin. He had the strength of a sword saint and martial saint, and now he was using a similar sword technique. Was this a coincidence, or was there something else? The system hurriedly stopped Jun Changshao's imagination and said, it's very normal for a sword saint to gather countless swords. Host, please keep your bold thoughts to yourself. Whoosh! At this moment, the swords above the city disappeared into thin air. Buzz! 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 Behind Emperor Jinwei, waves of water rippled, and then transformed into a golden halo. The swords that had disappeared gradually reappeared. There were at least 100,000 of them, and they covered the entire sky. No matter which angle one looked at it from, the scene was extremely majestic. Whoosh! Whoosh! At the same time, violent winds howled. Jun Patriarch. Emperor Jinwei raised his head proudly and said, this Emperor's Flying Dragon Sword Dance, can you take it? Flying Dragon Sword Dance? Jun Changshao shook his head and said, it's a bit disappointing for a tyrant to use such a poetic sword name. Whoosh! He held the jade dragon asked the heaven's sword horizontally in front of him, and his black hair fluttered wildly. The sword aura around him instantly spread out. Emperor Jinwei frowned slightly and said, the sword aura you're releasing seems to be similar to my flying dragon sword dance. Could it be that you can also summon 10,000 swords? Summon 10,000 swords? Jun Changshao sneered and said, it's just a move that I haven't played with before. Whoosh! Whoosh! As he spoke, the sword aura that he released rushed toward the ground, and then enveloped the stones, wood, branches, and leaves, causing them to fly up on their own. Each of them contained a sharp aura. Summoning swords was indeed a move that he had not played with before. Now that Gosheng released his sword aura, everything could be used as a sword. The difference between the two was obvious. Whoosh! 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 The stones and leaves that were enveloped by the sword aura flew over one after another, and then hung behind Jun Changshao, facing off against Emperor Jinwei. At this moment, the scene that appeared in everyone's vision was full of sword aura and sword light. Too terrifying. Elder Lin was so shocked that his mind trembled. He hurriedly retreated further away with Yuan Gongzi, fearing that when the two of them fought, it would endanger him. Li Qingyang and the others also retreated one after another. Xiao Ziji even took out his divine weapon, the Cloud Dream Hero's secret. With his back facing Jinwei City, it was like an indestructible mountain, providing absolute safety for the residents of the city. Scapegoat. Yi Xingqian said indifferently, they're not the people of Azure Sun County, why are you protecting them so carefully? Xiao Ziji said, because the Patriarch doesn't want those children to die. Yi Xingqian thought to himself, he really thinks of himself as the embodiment of chivalry. 1,000 miles away. Jun Changshao and Emperor Jinwei were still facing off against each other. The sword aura and sword light that gathered around them became more and more powerful. Obviously, it was the time to draw their swords. Dragon Sword Dance. Swish 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 swish. The sharp swords in the golden halo suddenly dragged streams of light and shot out like a school of sardines. The explosive sword aura instantly evolved into a lifelike golden dragon beast. Snap! Jun Changshao snapped his fingers. Swish swish swish. Swish 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 swish. The dense sword light behind him suddenly flew out. They also gathered together like a school of sardines, but when they rushed over, they seemed to have turned into a ferocious tiger shark. Hoo hoo hoo. Hoo hoo hoo. The dragon-like and shark-like arrow rain fiercely collided with each other. For a moment, the dark sky suddenly flickered with bright light spots, like fireworks exploding in an instant, and finally dyed the entire sky as bright as day. Ding 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 ding. Boom 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 boom. Jun Changshao and Emperor Jinwei stood proudly on the spot. As the sword aura collided with each other, they involuntarily took a step back. Yuan Gongzi and Elder Lin held their breaths. At this moment, the dazzling scene that appeared in their field of vision was simply too shocking. If they weren't sure that both of them were saint rank, they would even suspect that an emperor rank battle was nothing more than this. Swish, as thousands of sword lights violently collided, Emperor Jinwei's body flickered with golden light. He rushed toward Jun Changshao as one with his sword and closed the distance between him and Jun Changshao in the blink of an eye. Jun Patriarch. This battle is over. Hoo hoo. The golden light was scorching hot, and the space instantly collapsed. Jun Changshao raised his eyebrows. The sword aura around him instantly gathered together and formed layers of defensive barriers. At this moment, Emperor Jinwei's lips curled up into a smile. The sharp sword aura that was originally charging forward was instantly enveloped by hot flames. He roared, "Supremely fire, burn the void." Jun Changshao's pupils contracted. He exclaimed, "This guy is also a fire elementalist." Rumble, an intense explosion suddenly appeared in the sky. Hot flames spewed out, and the two sword lights stopped colliding. They lost their power and dissipated. Swish! Emperor Jinwei quickly flew out from the flames. He hovered in his original position with his hands behind his back. A victorious smile appeared on his face. "Young master!" Elder Lin exclaimed, "The battle is over." "What's the outcome?" Yuan Gongzi asked hurriedly. Looking at the flames that covered half of the sky, Elder Lin said solemnly, "Jun Changshao lost. I'm afraid he's either dead or injured." Yuan Gongzi was stunned at first. Then, he covered his face and laughed loudly. But gradually, his laughter was filled with sadness. He said dejectedly, "It's my life's regret that I couldn't defeat such a strong opponent personally." Chapter 1056. The flames in the sky burned wildly. The scorching power tore through space and caused a large area to collapse. "It's over, it's over. This guy who made me feel so powerless and hopeless was finally taken care of by a more powerful opponent." Young Master Yuan really wanted to laugh out loud. However, the originally happy matter suddenly changed along with the change of mood. It became depressing and sad. Jun Changshao was a super strong opponent, and he would regret it for the rest of his life if he couldn't defeat him. Sigh. Yuan Gongzi shook his head. "Why did you come to the Eastern Sea Fishery State? Why aren't you on the continent?" Was he an enemy of Jun Changshao? As the deputy sect leader of the Demon Emperor's Gate, they were absolutely irreconcilable. Now that he had lost that identity, there seemed to be no grudge between the two of them. He was even saved by that guy on the way to the Eastern Sea Fishery State, so he owed him a favor. Before he could return the favor, he was already dead. "Elder Lin, this is so uncomfortable." Yuan Gongzi clutched his chest, and the smile on his face was replaced by pain. "Young master." Elder Lin's eyes widened in horror. "Look, look." The uncomfortable young master Yuan raised his head and saw that in the distant sky, the flames that filled the sky were rolling crazily. Then, they began to gradually converge. The smile on Emperor Jinwei's face suddenly froze. The scorching flames were his supremely fire, but they were now being controlled by some kind of power, and they were forcibly converging against his will. Whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The scorching flames converged rapidly and gradually formed a sphere. Jun Changshao's figure appeared in his field of vision. He held a sword in one hand and raised his other hand high, twirling it continuously. Whoosh whoosh, gradually, the violent flames condensed from the supremely fire condensed into a huge fireball under the great power and control. Above the two fingers, it was like a globe that was incessantly rotating. Yuan Gongzi was shocked. What's going on? Jun Changshao raised the fireball and said, if you hadn't used a fire-type martial skill, I would have forgotten that I have a holy flame body and a 5-elemental body. Holy flame body? 5-elemental body? Great Emperor Jinwei was shocked. It was the most powerful body of fire on the falling star continent and the primordial body constitution that contained the power of fire. Even in the isolated fishery province of the East Ocean, he had heard of it before. Hearing about the body of the holy flame, Yuan Gongzi immediately recalled that the information he had gathered mentioned that the patriarch of the sect of all times was very strong at playing with fire. However, this was the first time he had heard of the 5 elements body. That's not right. Didn't the 5 elements body come from the ancient 5 elements martial emperor? In the War of the Monarchs, the 5 elements martial emperor had died, and his physique had disappeared. Why would someone inherit this physique 10,000 years later? Could it be? Yuan Gongzi suddenly recalled the time when Jun Changshao led his disciples to challenge the 10 Directions life-ending pagoda through a projection array formation. He exclaimed in shock, he obtained the inheritance from the pagoda? Hoo! The fireball formed by the supremely fire was still spinning in the sky. Jun Changshao smiled faintly and said, playing with fire in front of me, you really overestimate yourself. Whoosh, with a wave of his finger, the supremely fire, which contained violent power, instantly smashed toward the original owner. It was as if he didn't recognize anyone. This kind of flame was considered one of the best in the continent, but compared to Jun Changshao, who controlled the blue heavenly spirit flame, purple mystic sacred flame, and scarlet star absolute flame, it was definitely nothing. The weak supremely fire was like a pitiful little thing that was surrounded by a group of strong men. It could only tremble and compromise, not daring to go to the east. Hoo! The scorching flames pressed down. Great Emperor Jinwei's expression was very interesting. His own flames were bombarding him, and no matter how he tried to mobilize them, the other party ignored him. This was the most tragic thing in the world. Great Emperor Jinwei was, after all, how could he just sit there and wait for death? He suddenly raised the dragon power sword, and the sword was instantly enveloped in flames. Then, the scorching flames that had just erupted flew out and merged with the incoming fireball, increasing its strength out of thin air. Jun Changshao shook his head. He had released the body of the holy flame and the 5 elements body, forming an absolute fire domain in this space. How dare he summon the fire element? Hoo boom! Another violent explosion suddenly erupted in the air. The originally shattered space was once again affected, and the scale of the collapse extended even further. Whoosh! Great Emperor Jinwei flew out from the flames and landed on the ground with a boom. There were many scorching marks on his golden armor. Clang! He stabbed the dragon power sword into the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. The crown on his head also fell off, and his black hair scattered in a disheveled manner. His cold face was slightly pale. Not only did the oncoming flames contain the supremely fire, but they also contained 3 types of divine-grade flames as well as the enhancement of his 5 elements body. The explosive power of the flames was extremely powerful, and it was inevitable that he would be injured. While they were fighting, he suddenly appeared in front of Jun Changshao and unleashed his fire element in a sneak attack. However, the result was he went for wool and came home shorn. Damn it! Great Emperor Jinwei's eyes flashed with monstrous rage. Ever since he started cultivating, he had fought countless battles, big and small, and he had never been at a disadvantage. Look carefully. Right at this moment, Jun Changshao, who was hovering in the air, raised his sword and said coldly, "This is what it means to play with fire." Whoosh whoosh. In an instant, the 3 types of divine-grade flames, the blue heavenly spirit flame, the mysterious purple holy flame, and the crimson star absolute flame, and more than 10 types of sacred-grade flames erupted and gathered on the jade dragon asks the heaven's sword. Ka. At the same time, the right hand holding the sword instantly turned into steel, and powerful physical energy was injected into the sword. Whoosh! The space trembled slightly, and Jun Changshao disappeared into thin air. The enraged Great Emperor Jinwei's eyes were filled with shock, and he pulled out his sword without any hesitation before placing it in front of himself. Buzz! Right at this moment, the space trembled slightly. Jun Changshao appeared from within, and the Jade Dragon asks the Heaven's Sword in his hand glowed with rainbow light as it slashed down with earth-shattering power. At that moment, the scene seemed to have stopped. At that moment, the sword, fire, and force rippled in 3 different forms in the battle area. Then, when the slow-motion effect ended, it spread in all directions. Ka ka ka. Ka ka ka. Bam 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 bam, wherever the 3 energy ripples passed, the space was shattered, and the stones and plants were annihilated into nothingness. Retreat! Elder Lin was shocked, and he hurriedly took Yuan Gongzi and flew further away. Xiao Ziji's expression also became serious, and he hurriedly threw Yunmingxia out. It hovered above the city, and a golden defensive shield instantly spread out. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Earth walls protruded from the ground and flew to the city wall to form a line. As soon as the defense was formed, the remaining power formed by the 3 energies swept over crazily and violently collided with it. Ka ka ka. Xiao Ziji's feet that stepped on the ground had sunk a few inches. Ah! He shouted angrily, and his muscles bulged. Buzz buzz! Yunmingxia's light flickered, and the earth walls erupted with a heavy aura. This disciple of the sect of all times from southwest Yangzhou was using absolute defense to defend Jinwei City, which had nothing to do with him, and to protect the people who had no bloodline with him. Boom! At this moment, there was a deafening explosion in the battle area. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! An even more violent energy remnant came crashing down like a mountain torrent. Xiao Ziji saw this, and his face suddenly changed. The remnant power produced by the Patriarch's attack was already very terrifying. Now that he had to resist the second wave, he was afraid that he could only activate Yunmingxia's ultimate move. Buzz buzz buzz! Suddenly, a 5 elements 8 trigrams pattern appeared in front of him, and the remnant power was transferred to other areas. Junior brother Yi. Xiao Ziji's face was filled with joy. Yi Xingqian appeared in the camera with a side profile and said lightly, "I'm just worried that the remnant power will affect me." Li Qingyang shook his head and smiled. Junior brother Yi was obviously helping, but he denied it. This was really whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. With the help of Anyo's inverse the universe, the remnant power could be withstood, which made Xiao Ziji's resistance a lot easier. Of course. The 4 of them were more concerned about the battle situation. Therefore, after resolving the remnant power and protecting Jinwei City, they hurriedly looked at the area where the explosion came from. The 3 types of powerful energy had weakened. Jun Changshao stood 10 feet behind Emperor Jinwei proudly. The tip of Jade Dragon asked the Heaven's Sword was stuck to the ground, gathering an indestructible force. Crack! A cracking sound was heard. The dragon power sword that Emperor Jinwei held in front of him suddenly broke into 2 pieces. Li Qingyang and the others shook their heads helplessly. Even if the level of this weapon was very high, as long as the word "fan" was engraved, as long as it appeared in front of the Patriarch, it would never escape the fate of being destroyed. Crack! Crack! The golden armor on Emperor Jinwei's body also showed a slanted sword mark, and then it quickly fell off. Sword marks appeared on his body, and blood spurted out. This ambitious emperor was still standing in the same place, still holding the broken weapon that represented absolute royal power. His expression was already dull. The dragon power sword and dragon power armor that he had spent a lot of effort to refine with Master Fan as the lead and many blacksmiths as support were easily broken by that guy. This battle. It can end now. Suddenly, Jun Changxiao's voice came from behind. Emperor Jinwei recovered from his daze and suddenly felt something strange on his butt. Not good. His expression changed drastically, and he was about to choose to dodge, but suddenly, a force rushed over mercilessly and directly hit an indescribable place. Broken chrysanthemum, wounds all over the ground, your smile, Emperor Jinwei screamed loudly. His whole body was lifted off the ground, and then after flying for a distance, he fell to the ground in a sorry state. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji felt a chill on their butts. Swoosh! Jun Changshao waved his hand, and the world finger was placed in front of him. He faced the camera with the side of his face and said proudly, "You can't compare swordsmanship, you can't compare fire, what right do you have to call yourself an emperor?" System, using a wretched method to give the opponent a fatal blow, and then finally putting on a heroic posture, how shameless must one be to do this? Elder Lin, who was hiding in the distance, crazily released his spiritual senses and caught Jun Changshao poking Emperor Jinwei with a strange weapon, causing him to fall to the ground. He said in disbelief, "It's over, it's over." Emperor Jinwei lost. Yuan Gongzi was stunned. Just now, all kinds of emotions were brewing, and the sudden reversal of the outcome was simply a waste of time. It was strange. When Emperor Jinwei defeated Jun Changshao, although Yuan Gongzi was happy, he was also a little sad. Now that Jun Changshao defeated Emperor Jinwei, although he was depressed, he was also a little happy. Damn it! What kind of mentality is this? Forget it, forget it. Yuan Gongzi shook his head and said, "I still owe him a favor. Since he's still alive, there will be a chance to repay him in the future." Elder Lin. He turned around and said, "Let's go." Originally, he wanted to rely on Emperor Jinwei and achieve great feats, but the former was defeated by Jun Changshao. He would probably be blackmailed and tortured, and was destined to be unable to achieve anything in the future. He could only find another home. "Young master," Elder Lin said, "where are we going?" Yuan Gongzi thought for a moment and said, "The other three empires need me. If there's no other way." He looked toward the southwest and added, "We can also go to the West Sea's Ling State and the South Sea's Du State." Sigh. Elder Lin said bitterly, "The world is so big, but there's no place for me and young master. Outside Jinwei City." The space slowly recovered from the collapsed state, and it would take some time to return to its previous state. Emperor Jinwei lay on the ground with a ferocious expression. Jun Changshao didn't use the sure-kill skill, but because his weapon and equipment were broken, he was seriously injured, and he was stabbed later. It could be said that it was one disaster after another. Defeated. I actually lost. Emperor Jinwei's heart was bleeding. As the ruler of the empire who cultivated both sword and martial arts, he could only accept success. It didn't matter even if his success was built on thousands of bones, but he couldn't accept failure. Moreover, it was a complete defeat in terms of sword and martial arts, fire attributes, and equipment. Ta! Jun Changshao walked over and placed 2 fingers on his head. He said calmly, "Can you hand over Master Fan now?" Jun Changshao. A shout came from the direction of the city, "The person you're looking for is here." Jun Changshao turned around and saw an old man who looked like a wizard and another old man with messy hair on the city wall. The state teacher yelled, "As long as you release the emperor, you can take Fan Yezi away." His bad omen had come true. The only thing he could do now was to use a hostage to reverse the situation. As for whether it would succeed or not, he didn't know, but he could only take a gamble. "This is the person who came to save me." Master Fan, who was officially on the stage, hurriedly tidied up his appearance. Then, he pushed his messy hair aside and shouted, "Warrior, I am Fan Yezi. Come and save me." Ga. Suddenly, the expression on his face froze. In his blurred vision, he saw Emperor Jinwei lying on the ground, as if he was severely injured. As for the Dragon Power Sword and Dragon Power Armor, broken. The weapons and equipment that this old man forged actually shattered. Pooh! Master Fan couldn't help but spit out blood. At this time, if Yuan Gongzi hadn't left, he would have understood Master Fan's feelings and would have even cried. Broken, broken, pooh! Master Fan spat out another mouthful of blood. His heart had suffered a ton of damage. Although the Dragon Power Sword and Dragon Power Armor were forged under duress, they were the result of many years of hard work. After they were completed, he even said to his blacksmiths, "This sword and armor are the strongest weapons I have ever forged. One is indestructible, and the other is indestructible. They can be called divine weapons." Chapter 1057. Ah! Master Fan lost control of his emotions and screamed, "Who destroyed it? Who destroyed it?" His shout almost shocked the Imperial Tutor to the point of jumping off the tower. It seems that he really is Fan Yezi. Jun Changshao was so sure because he saw the weapon he forged being destroyed and the sadness and pain in his eyes and body. It was impossible for an impostor to fake it. Swish! His figure disappeared and appeared on the tower. The advisor was dumbfounded. In order to threaten this guy with Master Fan, he had set up all kinds of defensive arrays. How could he come in so easily? Jun Changshao waved his hand. Paw! The advisor's face was red and flew out of the camera. He dared to threaten Go Sheng with a hostage. It was already good enough that he was not slapped to death. Jun Changshao released his spiritual energy and removed the chains on his hands and feet. He said seriously, "Master Fan, I received the message in the bottle and came to your rescue." "Thank you, warrior." Fan Yezi clasped his fists and was moved to tears. When he saw the broken weapon and equipment again, he could not help but cry. Jun Changshao asked, "Master Fan, you said in the letter that you have a big plan that is related to the survival of the land of the 9 states. What do you mean?" Fan Yezi quickly wiped his tears and said solemnly, "A few decades ago, a divine stone from the upper realm fell into the East Ocean Fishery Province and was obtained by Emperor Jinwei. He invited us to forge it." At this point, his eyes gradually widened. Ha! Jun Changshao furrowed his brows and turned around. Emperor Jinwei, who was already seriously injured, tried to stand up with his legs crossed. Jun Changshao. He threw away the half of the Dragon Power Sword and lowered his head. He said in a gloomy voice, "Do you think this is the end? Do you think this is enough to defeat me? Naive! Shua!" Emperor Jinwei suddenly opened his hands and shouted, "Today, I will show you what a divine weapon that mortals can only worship is." Hum! Buzz! The light behind him flickered and formed a huge golden pattern. A long spear with 7-colored flowing light that seemed to be surrounded by all kinds of energy slowly appeared. That divine stone. Seeing this, Fan Yezi was terrified. It has already been refined into a weapon. He and many famous forgers were invited to the Jinwei Empire. They once witnessed a piece of ore that emitted a sacred aura and were deeply shocked. God Stone. A divine stone from the upper realm. Emperor Jinwei ordered them to forge equipment, but Master Fan and the others refused. This was because, with their strength, they could refine any ore in the continent, but they were not qualified to refine upper realm divine stones. If you don't refine it, then die. Faced with the threat of great Emperor Jinwei, Fan Yezi and the others could only grit their teeth and forge. However, many people couldn't bear the backlash and died on the spot, bleeding from their 7 orifices. This was not only a divine stone, but also a life stone. Emperor Jinwei also realized that they couldn't forge the weapons with their own strength, so he could only give up on the idea and use the ores he had collected to forge the Dragon Power Sword and Dragon Power Armor. In that case, why did he insist on refining divine stones? Because this kind of ore from the upper realm, once it was condensed into a weapon, it would definitely be above the divine grade and would definitely be a divine artifact. With a divine artifact in hand. Not to mention unifying the East Sea Fishery Province, it was not impossible for him to kill his way to the 9 regions and compete with the 10 great martial emperors. As a man who claimed to be a great emperor, controlling a province was definitely not enough to satisfy his ambition. Only by controlling the entire Falling Star continent and opening a new era would he be satisfied. When Emperor Jinwei recruited Master Fan, he used this as an excuse, so he came up with the big plan in the message in a bottle, which was related to the survival of the 9 regions. In Fan Yezi's opinion, The power of the divine stone from the upper realm was extremely terrifying. If Emperor Jinwei really refined it into a weapon and controlled it, the entire falling star continent would definitely usher in a disaster. Unable to refine divine stones, depressed. Unable to refine divine stones, gratified. However, he and many other famous forgers couldn't do anything about the divine stone, so how could Emperor Jinwei refine it? Disaster is coming. Fan Yezi said with a face of despair, disaster is coming. He had many contacts with Emperor Jinwei and knew that this person was a complete madman. If he had terrifying power, the entire world would be plunged into misery and suffering for his 1,000 years of hegemony in his eyes. Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo-hoo. The colorful spear finally appeared completely from the golden pattern. The surrounding air was violently compressed, and the slightly healed space collapsed again. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the other two were affected. They suddenly felt as if they were carrying a heavy mountain on their backs, and they couldn't move at all. Their eyes were filled with horror. He Wudi said in disbelief, how can there be such a weapon in the mortal world? This doesn't conform to the rules of heaven and earth at all. He had seen weapons more terrifying than the colorful spear, but it was limited to the high-level plane he lived in. A mortal world with rules and restrictions shouldn't have a treasure that surpassed the upper limit. Ha ha ha. Emperor Jinwei's black hair fluttered wildly, and he seemed to have gone completely crazy. In front of a divine weapon, you are just ants. Jun Changshao frowned at this moment. After the colorful spear appeared, the terrifying pressure erupted. Although it didn't completely bind his body, it still brought a huge amount of pressure. The system said, this spear is above divine grade. Jun Changshao was speechless. My mountain pointer is also above divine grade. Why doesn't it have such a domineering aura? The system said, weapons above divine grade are already classified as items from the upper realm, so it's just a general term. Perhaps there are higher and lower grades. Jun Changshao understood. Although his mountain pointer was above divine grade, if it was based on the upper realm, it might not be as high as this spear. Fuck. Jun Changshao thought to himself, this is troublesome. This kind of super suppressive aura had greatly restricted his movements. If the other party attacked again, the situation would be even more troublesome. Danger. It gradually rose in his heart. Ever since he transmigrated and activated the system, this was the first time Jun Changshao felt so powerless when facing an enemy. The system said, the host's journey has been smooth sailing. Now that you are finally under pressure, the readers will be happy to see this. Fuck off. Paw. At this moment, Emperor Jinwei raised one hand and grabbed the holy spear suspended in midair. Violent energy roared out again, causing the space to tremble violently. Phew, he took a step forward, and the spear swept over with thousands of rays of light. The terrifying aura reached its peak. Ft. Ft. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others spurted out blood. After going through all kinds of tempering, they had strong physical bodies. Just the impact of the aura had already damaged their meridians. Many people had been questioning why the disciples of the sect of all times, who had just entered Wu Huang, could be evenly matched with the two words Xian Huang in the dimensional battlefield, and could even be obliterated. It was because of the equipment. Now, the weapon made from the upper realm's divine stone could suppress them to the point that they couldn't move or even vomit blood. It was also an absolute suppression in terms of equipment. Whoosh, the terrifying seven-colored light swept over with a sweeping momentum. Although it locked onto Jun Changshao, because the attack range was too large, not only Li Qingyang and the others, but also half of Jinwei City's gate was enveloped. It was going to blast over. Everything would be turned into ashes. Ka ka ka. Jun Changshao, who was on the city tower, was fully armed. A pair of steel wings gathered, and he suddenly broke free from the restraint of the aura. He turned into a stream of light and rushed down. Swoosh! He raised his right hand, and hard blade appeared. Bankai! Flowing fire blade! Clang! In an instant, the opening talisman was crushed, and Hard Blade was suddenly enveloped by various flames. When the flames were flung away, the second form of the 16-word greatsword appeared, and a vast aura suddenly erupted. The system was surprised. This is the first time I've seen the host open it so decisively. Nonsense. If he didn't open the seal immediately, how could he fight? Whoosh! Jun Changshao rushed toward the seven-colored light with his sword, and shouted angrily, "I have a divine weapon too." Ka ka ka. Ka 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 ka. Hard Blade's aura erupted. The space that was already crying was once again mercilessly whipped, and the shattering sound was like a scream. At the same time, the power of absolute control first spread over, but when it touched the seven-colored light, it couldn't freeze it. It was ineffective. The power of restraint was ineffective. The power of a weapon above the divine grade was terrifying. Hard Blade couldn't be controlled. Jun Changshao could understand, so after failing, he continued to move forward at full speed and poured all the power of the sword into Hard Blade. Hiss hiss hiss. A huge sword aura suddenly tore out. Boom! In an instant, two terrifying forces exploded in midair, and the surrounding ground crazily caved in and cracked. The powerful psionic energy crazily wreaked havoc, and the whole world seemed to be trembling violently. Bang bang bang! Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the rest retreated and slammed into the city wall. Ka 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 ka. The remaining power was still rampant, and the solid city wall was shaved off piece by piece, showing deep dents. Rumble. The east gate directly collapsed, and the city walls on both sides gradually collapsed. In the city, the powerful fluctuations wreaked havoc on the ground and the buildings. It felt like the end of the world was coming. Father. Mother. I'm afraid. The children were frightened and shrank into their parents' arms. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers stood in place in horror. At this critical moment, they took off their helmets and knelt down to pray for the emperor. However, they didn't know. The culprit who caused the city to be destroyed at any time was Emperor Jinwei, who was regarded as a god. Although the artifact was very terrifying, how could a mortal city compete with it? Swoosh! At this moment, a golden light flashed outside the city. Xiao Ziji landed on the gradually collapsing city tower. His eyes flashed coldly as he shouted, "Great Desolation Seal, as solid as a rock." Huff huff. The ground outside the city cracked rapidly, and solid earth walls rose into the sky, quickly spreading to every corner and tilting inwards, forming a defense system similar to a bird's nest. Buzz! Buzz! Yi Xingqian also flew up, and his hands frequently formed seals. The surface of each earth wall was imprinted with the 5 elements 8 trigrams pattern, forming the momentum of the stars. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. All kinds of explosive aftershocks whizzed over and were transferred to other directions, resulting in gorgeous explosions. The current scene was that the city was suffering from all kinds of aftershocks, and the distant areas were experiencing crazy explosions. Back to the battle area, Jun Changshao's unstoppable blade directly broke through the 7-colored light and then pierced through, launching a destructive attack. Although Emperor Jinwei was shocked that the other party also had a divine artifact, he could only wave his spear and fight fiercely. Boom! 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 In an instant, the two of them engaged in a crazy battle at low, mid, and high altitudes. The sound of weapons colliding and the explosion of energy swept up gusts of wind, and the space was also crying out. The battle between Jun Changshao and Emperor Jinwei just now was classified as a saint-level battle. After each of them used their trump cards, it was instantly upgraded to an emperor-level battle. Not to mention the space being shattered, the ground thousands of feet away from them was already endlessly caved in, and it was crazily spreading outwards. It was as if heaven and earth were collapsing with a raise of their hands. Boom boom boom. Boom 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 boom. The rhythm of the battle accelerated, and the intensity kept increasing. This made Yi Xingqian suffer. In the end, he couldn't use universe reversal and was instantly destroyed. He endured the boiling blood in his body and shouted, "Scapegoat! I'll leave it to you." The solemn Xiao Ziji's skin quickly turned golden, and he shouted, "Come on!" Boom boom boom. The energy blasts were all dissolved by the Great Wall of Desolation. However, the impact was very fierce, and Xiao Ziji's face gradually became ferocious. If it was only a few times, he could still hold on. However, judging from the intensity of the battle between the Patriarch and Emperor Jinwei, it would be difficult to determine the winner without dozens or hundreds of moves. Whoosh! Whoosh! Li Qingyang and He Wudi hurriedly flew over. The two of them raised their palms and slapped Xiao Ziji's back, and the spiritual energy in their bodies crazily poured into him to provide him with sufficient energy. The civilians and soldiers looked at the four martial artists who were previously causing trouble desperately protecting their city, and their expressions gradually became sluggish. "Dad, Mom," a child said innocently, "four big brothers are protecting us." This unintentional sentence penetrated the hearts of the parents and soldiers. Boom! Boom! Outside the city, Jun Changshao and Emperor Jinwei were still fighting fiercely. The battle was so fierce that words couldn't describe it. A battle of this level was simply terrifying. Boom! After exchanging more than 10 moves, Emperor Jinwei placed his spear in front of him and quickly retreated until he was 1,000 meters away. Wah! He spat out a mouthful of blood. Jun Changshao didn't show any mercy. He flew over with hard-to-withdraw saber, and countless sword shadows appeared in the sky and slashed down from above. Emperor Jinwei raised his spear with difficulty and dissolved the sword shadows one by one. Boom boom boom. Dust flew everywhere, covering the sky and the sun. Ta! After a while, Jun Changshao landed with hard-to-withdraw saber stuck to the ground. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. His expression was slightly ferocious. He had used his strongest trump card twice, and both times, it was easy for him. Only this time, it was extremely difficult. However, it was worth it. Because after the dust dissipated, Emperor Jinwei stood in place. His spear was placed in front of him, and his body was bent. Blood flowed down from his palm along the spear handle. Plop! His knees went soft, and he knelt down. He was already seriously injured in the battle just now. Although he had the support of the divine artifact, he couldn't hold on. At this moment, he was exhausted and extremely weak. Therefore, even if he had equipment above the divine grade, he was defeated by Jun Changshao again. It's really over this time. Jun Changshao walked over step by step, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. You can also rest in peace. The best outcome for him was to completely wipe out this tyrant who didn't care about his city and the lives of the people. Over. Emperor Jinwei raised his head with difficulty, and his eyes flashed with a crazy luster. He smiled bitterly and said, Not yet. Master! Take my emperor's body and use it to your heart's content. Whoosh whoosh. In an instant, the supremely fire art was no longer suppressed. The sealed soul in the depths of his heart was suddenly released, and his body quickly erupted with terrifying power. Damn it! Jun Changshao cursed loudly, does this guy still have a trump card? Whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Emperor Jinwei's weak eyes gradually became dull, and then they became abnormally cold. The vast grassland green attribute emerged from his body and shrouded him in a cocoon-like state. This aura! Jun Changshao's expression changed again and again, and he said in surprise, Soul Race. Chapter 1058. Emperor Jinwei really couldn't hold on any longer. This battle was basically over. However, as a self-proclaimed emperor, he couldn't allow failure, especially not on his doorstep. Thus, he gave up on channeling the supremely flame technique and unleashed the demon in his heart. In reality, he had no other choice. If he didn't unleash this power, he would die at the hands of Jun Changshao. Since he was going to die anyway, he could only compromise with his master. His soul would be completely devoured, but his body would still exist. If his master could help him fulfill his wish, He could die with a smile on his face. Lunatic. Lunatic from head to toe. Giving his body and power to an evil being would bring harm not only to the East Sea fish state, but even the entire falling star continent. Emperor Jinwei couldn't care less. He couldn't accept his failure, so he could only unleash the demon in his heart and drag the entire world down with him. Kukuku. Kukuku. The soul that had been suppressed was finally able to break free, and it began to laugh in an unbridled manner. He knew that this day would eventually come, but he didn't think that the human he had trained would be defeated by an outsider from the southwestern Yang state, and that he would be able to take control of him in advance. Jinwei, my disciple. Master will avenge you for the humiliation you've suffered. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The green grassland attribute erupted from his body and instantly enveloped Emperor Jinwei's body. It began to occupy his meridians, flesh, and blood, and began to devour his thoughts and soul. This aura was exactly the same as when Dai Lu was possessed. Thus, Jun Changshao instantly determined that there was a soul tribe being in this emperor's body. Then, many things were very easy to understand. In just a few short decades, Emperor Jinwei's meteoric rise had to be due to the power of the soul tribe. Your Majesty, the imperial advisor lying at the foot of the city wall was horrified. The ominous feeling in his divination became unprecedentedly strong the moment Emperor Jinwei was enveloped by the green grassland attribute. Wasn't this danger brought about by Jun Changshao? Why was the sense of danger so terrifying when His Majesty was enveloped by the green grassland attribute? Could it be that this was the real ominous sign, and all his divination was wrong? In fact, Jun Changshao had already proven that he wouldn't endanger the Jinwei Empire when he saved the child's parents. That was because the trace of kindness in his heart wouldn't allow him to do something inhumane. Souls were different. They devoured and destroyed. Thus, when they took control of Emperor's body's body, the ominous omen that the royal preceptor had deduced and calculated was referring to Emperor Jinwei and the soul race clansmen inside his body. Whoosh whoosh. The grassland attribute, the green grassland attribute, and the grassland attribute, est. Kukukukukukukukuku. Sect Master Jun, you've severely injured my disciple and forced him to give up his body. As a token of my gratitude, I'll slowly torture you and extract the energy in your body bit by bit. I'll let you experience what it means to be in a state worse than death. Who? The Jinwei, the green emperor's body. Great Emperor Jinwei, who was kneeling on the ground with his spear, suddenly stood up. His eyes had turned completely green, and the paleness and weakness on his face had completely disappeared. Seeing this, the state preceptor's heart trembled. The ominous omen had arrived. The end of the world had arrived. Of course. After successfully taking control of Emperor Jinwei's body, the second soul's injuries were completely healed, and its power returned to its peak. It raised its head and laughed loudly. The living beings of the falling star continent will also become my power and be baptized by fear. Kakik. Keek, paw. When he laughed out loud, the flat sucking mouth mercilessly stuck to his forehead. Jun Changshao had unknowingly picked up the magically modified vacuum cleaner and said coldly, "Have you ever heard that villains die because they talk too much? Not good." The second soul's expression changed drastically. Fourth gear. Open fire. Jun Changshao activated enhance mode without hesitation, and a powerful suction force instantly erupted from the flat mouth, directly pulling Emperor Jinwei's scalp. Swish! His head full of Emperor's hair couldn't withstand it and was sucked in first. Ah! The second soul let out a strange cry. The energy in its body burst out in an attempt to resist the suction force. However, in front of the vacuum cleaner, any resistance was futile. It might even accelerate the speed of the vacuum cleaner's suction. The violent suction force was terrifying to the extreme. The terrified imperial advisor could see with his naked eyes that the grassland green around Emperor Jinwei's body was being sucked in crazily. A shadow that resembled a soul seemed to be screaming in pain. Swish! After a while, the demon that had just taken over the human body and walked out of hell was sucked in cleanly. It rampaged in the vacuum cleaner, but it couldn't break through the solid barrier. Strictly speaking, Emperor Jinwei was only a small boss. The soul that existed in his body was the big boss. However, he was sucked in as soon as he appeared. What a tragedy! Thump! Without the support of the second soul, Emperor Jinwei fell to the ground. The soul that was about to be obliterated once again took control of his body. His eyes were filled with shock. He thought that he could easily kill this person after releasing his master. However, he was sucked in less than a minute after he appeared. Impossible! This is impossible! You can forgive the sins of heaven, but you can't live with the sins you bring upon yourself. Jun Changshao coldly raised the jade dragon asks the heaven's sword and slashed at Emperor Jinwei in disbelief. No! Pucci! At this point, the ambitious and powerful Emperor Jinwei died. His head roared unwillingly as it gradually separated from his body and rolled out. His dirty blood stained the ground red. Your Majesty! The imperial advisor's voice trembled violently. At that moment, he was confused again. Was the ominous sign referring to the green attribute just now, or was it referring to Jun Changshao in the first place? Emperor Jinwei died in battle, and the light on the spear dissipated. Jun Changshao took a step forward and grabbed the handle of the spear with his right hand. He lifted the spear up and spun it in a circle with his magic of love. He said, "Only a righteous person like me is qualified to hold a divine weapon of this level." Tui! The system spat on the ground to show its respect. Thump! Thump! On the city gate tower, Li Qingyang, Xiao Zuiji, and the other three watched as the sect master beheaded the big boss. Immediately, they collapsed to the ground, powerless. Then, they gasped for air. Risking the danger to resist the aftershock for someone he didn't know, this kind of behavior was simply stupid to the extreme. But when all the disasters were over, it felt pretty good to see the admiration on the faces of the children behind. Please don't complain that this was the embodiment of the author's strong desire to survive. It's just that in a dangerous world, why can't he be more kind and chivalrous? Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the hidden mission, eliminate the tyrant and pacify the good. The reward is 20,000 contribution points. Ding! Sect contribution points, 89900700000. Ding! Contribution points overflow. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the hidden mission and triggering the hidden reward. You have obtained Divine Grade Aptitude Transformation Liquid X1, Newly Opened Talisman X1, and Experience Talisman X4. Hum. The cracked space gradually healed, and the murderous aura that shrouded Jinwei City gradually dissipated. The dark sky also returned to the clear sky. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji stood on the city tower and said, "It's over." Chapter 1059. Emperor Jinwei was killed, and the second soul was taken. This battle that lasted for many chapters was finally over. As the real big boss, he was taken into the magically modified vacuum cleaner after just an opening speech. It was tragic. What was even more tragic was, at this moment, he was in the Heaven Origin Soul Suppressing Tower, looking at the first soul. When fellow townsmen saw fellow townsmen, their eyes were filled with tears. The two of them wanted to say something but stopped. They almost hugged each other and cried bitterly. In terms of achievements, the second soul was better than the first soul. At least the target he chose was stronger than Dai Lu. However, the ending was the same. Therefore, no matter how good he was before, he was classified as a failure. Smack! The whip lashed out, and the pain exploded. The second soul hugged his head and screamed. In the end, he lay on the ground and rolled around. Smack! Smack! Little area was like a professional gyroscope. While waving the soul-suppressing whip, she stared with her almond-shaped eyes and said, "Are you going to say it or not? Are you going to say it or not?" "I say it." What is it? The second soul roared at the top of his lungs. Little Area stopped and looked at Jun Changshao. Master, what did he say? System, this kind of torture mode without even asking, it was simply showing off, although it didn't have a scalp. Jun Changshao sat on the back of the first soul and said, Are there any of your kind in the East Sea Fishery State? This time, he crossed the sea to save Master Fan and accidentally caught a soul. This was definitely an unexpected gain. It would be even better if he could find the third or fourth soul. No. Just me. It was just the first experience of the soul-suppressing whip, and the second soul was already in so much pain that he wanted to die, so he didn't show any determination. Are you sure? Yes. Jun Changshao got up and said, Area, I'll leave this guy to you to purify. Yes. Area imitated the soldiers and saluted. I promise to complete the mission. Smack smack smack. Ah! Inside the soul-suppressing whip, screams kept coming. As a person who had experienced it, the first soul shrank in the corner and could only mourn for his kind in his heart. Jinwei City. At this moment, there was complete silence. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers stood rooted to the ground. Great Emperor Jinwei was their god. Now that he had been beheaded, it was equivalent to losing his soul. Jun Changshao lightly descended from the top of the city gate tower, carrying the extremely terrified imperial preceptor in his hand. He said indifferently, Tell me everything you know. Everything I know. The state preceptor's brain worked quickly, and he quickly understood what the other party meant. So, he suppressed the panic in his heart and said loudly, People of the Jinwei Empire. The power imparted to you is actually just being controlled. When you need it, you can use it at will. In the eyes of the Emperor, everyone is just a tool for him to achieve his great cause, including me. As the only sober person in the Jinwei Empire, he naturally knew what the Jinwei Emperor had done. But in order to save his life, he could only pretend to be ignorant and even help the tyrant. After the state preceptor finished speaking, the entire Jinwei city became even quieter. Do the people and soldiers understand? All of this had nothing to do with Jun Changshao, because he just needed them to know the truth. Rumble. In the forbidden area of the Imperial Palace's treasury, a huge stone door was slowly raised. Master. Paige released her earth attribute and said, All the treasures are inside. He had followed Jun Changshao across the sea to this place, and he had never been shown anything. Now, he was finally put to good use. An empire's treasury, gold, silver, treasures, and all kinds of resources were really too much to count. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji were a little dazzled. With Gou Sheng's personality, he would definitely lick all of them. Outside the city, Jun Changshao and the others left. Everyone's back was very long under the dusk. There was a sense of leaving after the matter is done, hiding their identity and reputation. Big brother. At the gate of Broken City, the children's shouts could be heard. Because of their age, they had not been completely brainwashed by the Jinwei Emperor. They simply thought that these people were great heroes for protecting the city and saving their parents. Little brats. Jun Changshao said, Remember, the cultivation of martial arts is to protect your family, not to hurt them. These words reverberated in the sky above Jinwei City and between heaven and earth. Once again, they were deeply imprinted in the hearts of the children. Big brother. A child with big eyes yelled at the top of his lungs, When I grow up, I will definitely go to the southwestern Yangzhou to find you. Jun Changshao stopped, and the corners of his mouth rose into a smile. Little brat. I'll wait for you. Big brother, my name is Yifeng. Yi as in maple leaf, Feng as in maple leaf. Whoosh, in the sky above the Eastern Ocean Fishery Province, the ancient warship dragged a streak of light behind it. Fan Yezi, who was rescued, hugged the mast and exclaimed, What kind of craftsmanship is this to be able to fly in the sky? Patriarch. Li Qingyang walked into the control room and asked, Are we returning to the continent? Jun Changshao took a sip of tea and said, Emperor Jinwei was an extremely ambitious man. He would have unified the Eastern Ocean Fishery Province sooner or later. Now that I've destroyed him, the three empires are safe. Shouldn't you be grateful? Li Qingyang, Blazing Flame City of the Blazing Flame Empire. The emperor of this empire stood in front of the palace. His legs were trembling violently because Emperor Jinwei's body and head were hanging above the palace. The surrounding civil and military officials were so frightened that their faces turned pale. Emperor Jinwei had been the incarnation of a devil for the past few years. He had forced them to ally with other empires, and now his head had been delivered to them. Everyone. Jun Changshao sat in the palace, clasped his fingers together and said, "This tyrant, who had the ambition to unify the East Sea fishery state, has been killed by my sword. From now on, you can sit back and relax. It's not too much to offer some martial arts resources, right?" Hard to retract blade hadn't been sheathed yet. It lay quietly beside him, releasing a supreme aura that permeated the entire palace. It's not too much," the Emperor of Flames said with a trembling voice. "June has a plane to catch. Please give it to us quickly. Please wait a moment, please wait a moment." After receiving the benefits, Jun Changshao went to the Qingxian Empire and the Huyue Empire on the ancient warship and obtained a large amount of martial arts resources with the excuse of, "It's not too much, is it?" After everything was done, he had just reached the coast of the Eastern Ocean when the effects of hard-to-retract blade ended. He was paralyzed instantly. Sigh. Jun Changshao lay in the control room and sighed. It would have been great if there were no side effects. No wonder this guy was in a hurry to blackmail the three empires after taking care of Emperor Jinwei. He was waiting for the right time. "Patriarch," Li Qingyang said, "Senior Luo is here." "Oh?" Jun Changshao struggled to stand up and saw Luo Zhilong walking out of the forest with a lonely expression. He was carrying a big sack on his back. Li Qingyang said in a low voice, "Patriarch, there are bones inside." "Brother." Luo Zhilong walked and whispered, "I've wronged you for the past few decades. Today, I'll take you home." Jun Changshao shook his head and ordered Li Qingyang to bring him up. Then, he looked at the blue sea and the sky in the distance and said, "Let's go home." "Patriarch." Li Qingyang reminded, "Yuan Gongzi is hiding in the dark. Please come. Let's return to the Eastern Ocean Fishery Province together." "Yes. My name is Yuan Feng. I was planning to join the three great empires, but on the way, I found that Jun Changshao was one step ahead of me. I panicked a little. Then, I discussed with Elder Lin that we shouldn't stay here for long. We decided to go to the South Sea or the West Sea. But, once again, I was discovered by him and invited onto a flight to the mainland. God! Save me!" Chapter 1060. Above the East Sea. The ancient warship stopped in midair. Xiao Zuiji jumped up from the deck. His entire body flew out beautifully, and he quickly summoned his sniper rifle. As he was falling at an extremely high speed, he decisively pulled the trigger. Whoosh! The bullet shot out, piercing through the layers of space. Plop! A big fish that had just jumped out of the sea had its head pierced through. Whoosh! Li Qingyang released his spiritual energy, which turned into an invisible hand that grabbed the fish and dragged it onto the ancient warship. Clang clang clang. Yi Xingqian stepped forward, and his sword flashed. Plop! Plop! The big fish was cut into pieces and placed neatly on the stove. He Wudi raised his hand, and the fire attribute of the five elements heavenly reflection art was activated. He began the most serious activity: barbecue. Luo Zhilong. Master Fan. You too. Jun Changshao sat at the table and raised his glass. Stop looking and drink. Jun Patriarch. Luo Zhilong's mouth twitched. Let's hurry up. In the dangerous East Sea, they were brazenly having a barbecue. That was too ostentatious. They were doing whatever they wanted. Old Luo. Jun Changshao drank a bowl of wine and said meaningfully, Sailing is a journey. What matters is not the destination, but the scenery along the way and the mood. Luo Zhilong was stunned. He raised his glass. Jun Patriarch is wise. Beside him, Fan Yezi was also stunned. He raised his glass and said, listening to your words is better than studying for 10 years. Yuan Gongzi was absolutely sober, but when he thought about how he couldn't escape from this guy's evil clutches, he felt bitter. He picked up a big bowl of wine and gulped it down. Come, come. Drink until the sky turns dark. After 3 rounds of wine, Yuan Gongzi hugged the wine jug, his tears falling like rain as he howled, Elder Lin, why am I so tragic? Elder Lin, who was sitting at the side, wanted to take the wine jug away and let him truly hug him, but just as he reached out, he was pushed away by the young master. Go away, Elder Lin silently left. The young master was a talented and ambitious person, but under the successive blows, he suffered too much pain. Plop! Elder Lin came to the driver's seat and knelt down. Jun Patriarch, this old man is willing to exchange my life for young master's safety. In any case, you are a semi-sage. Do you still have any dignity to kneel in front of others so easily? Jun Changshao said indifferently. Yuan Gongzi saved this old man's life. Why should I care about my dignity for him? Elder Lin said solemnly. His eyes flashed with memories of the past. That was a long, long time ago. Forget it, I'll leave it to the people in the animation team to play with memories. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, when I was fighting with Jinwei Emperor, the two of you seemed to be watching the battle from a distance. That's right. Elder Lin said truthfully. In fact, with his current cultivation, he could attack Jun Changshao and even kill him. However, after witnessing the thrilling battle outside Jinwei City, he had a deep and strong fear. Even if the other party looked weak and seemed to have no cultivation, he didn't dare to have the slightest thought of attacking. Why are you going to Jinwei City? The young master wants to join Jinwei Emperor and assist him in making great achievements. Jun Changshao was speechless. Since old Yuan is such an ambitious person, why doesn't he join me? Or is it that in his eyes, the potential of my sect of all times is not as good as the empire in the corner of the East China Sea? Elder Lin was silent. To be honest, he hoped that the young master would join Jun Changshao from the bottom of his heart because this man was too strong and was destined to be extraordinary in the future. However, because he had to listen to the young master, he didn't dare to say or ask. Go and persuade your young master. Jun Changshao said, I need a talent like him. If he's willing to join, I'll definitely give him high treatment. This Elder Lin was conflicted. The young master had a strong ego. He might not be able to persuade him. Of course. Jun Changshao added, it doesn't matter if he doesn't agree. My prison door is always open and waiting for him with open arms. The last 2 sentences were spoken in a singing manner. Since they had captured Yuan Gongzi, regardless of whether he joined them or not, he had to be locked up in the Sect of All Times prison and handed over to prisoner number 1, Zhao Daodu. In the Dark Land, the air was extremely austere. This was the Soul Race's continent. It was as terrifying as hell. At this moment, a group of Soul Race experts gathered in an ancient palace with a long history and were discussing something. We've lost contact with the 4th Hall Master too. Damn it, what's going on? In my opinion, the 3rd Hall Master and the 4th Hall Master must have been discovered by the Falling Star Continent's martial artists. Then, they were severely injured and fell into a deep coma. If that's the case, the Falling Star Continent 10,000 years in the future is stronger than we imagined. The 2 Hall Masters were discovered not long after they woke up. Thud! Thud! While everyone was discussing, the sound of wooden planks being stepped on came from outside the palace. Whoosh! A light breeze blew in from outside, carrying with it rose petals that filled the sky. Gradually, a beautiful woman with a voluptuous figure wearing high boots walked in. Her entire body exuded an intoxicating fragrance of roses. The Soul Race experts immediately lined up in 2 rows and lowered their heads slightly, welcoming her in a humble manner. Whoosh! The beautiful woman waved her long sleeves and sat on the main seat. She crossed her slender right leg over her left leg and leaned against the back of the chair. Her fingers brushed away a strand of hair on her forehead, and the aura of a queen instantly erupted. "Greetings, Empress." The soul race experts all bowed respectfully. In the world of the soul race, the one with the greatest authority was the Empress. The third Hall Master and the fourth Hall Master mentioned earlier were all her assistants. And this domineering woman with an extremely strong aura was the current Empress of the soul race continent. Because she liked roses all her life, she was called the Rose Empress after ascending the throne. According to the historical records of the soul race continent, this woman was the fourth Empress after Empress Ling Ping left her position 10,000 years ago. Empress Rose frowned slightly and said with slight anger, "Why did you summon me from another plane in such a hurry? What happened?" In the eyes of the clansmen, this Empress could be said to be elusive. This was because she had been fighting in other planes for at least 990 years since she ascended the throne. As a result, many soul race martial artists wondered if they had a boss. "Empress," a soul race expert said fearfully. The third Hall Master and the fourth Hall Master woke up one after another in the falling star continent and lost contact with each other. "Oh?" Empress Rose was surprised. "Empress," another soul race expert said, "the space-time tunnel connecting to the falling star continent is also reinforced by some kind of profound array. We can't rush in at all. A bunch of trash." Empress Rose reprimanded. Although the matter of the falling star continent was a mess left behind by the previous Empress, she had ordered her subordinates to resolve it perfectly as soon as possible when she conquered the other planes. However, there was no progress until now. The soul race experts fell silent. "I don't want to hear any excuses. I'll give you another year. If you can't enter the falling star continent," Empress Rose said coldly, "all of you will die to atone for your crimes." "Yes!" the soul race experts shouted. "Leave!" Everyone hurriedly left the hall. However, on the way, they whispered, "The Empress doesn't seem happy. Did she suffer in other planes? I heard that the Empress's remnant scroll was stolen." "No way. That thing is kept close to her body. Who is so valiant to steal it in front of the Empress? No wonder she's so unhappy. Since you knew about this, why didn't you tell us? Now, you've invited the Empress and directly issued a death order. If we can't complete it, we can only take our lives to atone for our crimes." Empress Rose naturally heard the discussion of her subordinates. She said angrily, "The guy who stole the remnant scroll, don't let me catch you." Chapter 1061. He had to go through all kinds of hardships to come to Fishery Province of the East Sea, so he would definitely enjoy the same treatment when he returned. Although Jun Changshao, who had unsealed the unstoppable blade, was in a weak state, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others were there, so everything went smoothly and they did not encounter any big trouble. Master Fan and Yuan Gongzi were dumbfounded the whole time. When they came, they had all experienced life and death, but on the way back in the spaceship, not only was the speed super fast, it was also super safe. It was simply too easy. "Young Master." Elder Lin found an opportunity and finally persuaded, "Actually, you can consider joining the Sect of all times. After all," Yuan Feng said, "Elder Lin, I will not join Jun Changshao." The scene changed, and he was already wearing a prisoner's uniform and in the cell of the Sect of all times. Creak. The moment the cell door closed, Yuan Gongzi was destined to spend the rest of his life in prison. Seeing that there was another cellmate, Zhao Daodu walked over from the corner and sat next to him, smiling. "Friend, how did you get in?" Yuan Gongzi did not speak, his face full of bitterness. After going around in circles for so long, he could not avoid becoming a prisoner in the end. "Don't be depressed." Zhao Daodu patted him on the shoulder and began to instill chicken soup for the soul. There are too many setbacks in life to face, and a real man should be braver in the face of setbacks. As long as there is light in your heart, you will eventually break through all darkness and thorns. Shut up. Dai Lu, who was sitting in the distance, forcefully interrupted. During this period, Zhao Daodu had been instilling him with chicken soup for the soul every day, and his spirit was on the verge of collapse at any time. Yuan Gongzi looked at Dai Lu, and Dai Lu also looked at him. The cell seemed to be replaced by a snowy scene, and the background music of plum blossoms slowly played. Snowflakes fluttered, and the north wind whistled. Heaven and earth were vast. Sect of all times, Great Hall. Jiangya, Li Luoqiu, and the others were reporting the recent situation of the sect. Jun Changshao, who had just returned, nodded as he listened, a satisfied expression appearing on his face. The sect had already entered the formalization stage. Even if he, the patriarch, was not around, it could still operate well. This was something to be gratified about. Thank you for your hard work, Jun Changshao said. Patriarch. Jiangya said, this is what we should do. Jun Changshao said, then let's keep it up. Everyone, let's work hard together to make the sect of all times even better and stronger. After the discussion was over, everyone retreated. Hall Master Li, wait a moment. Li Luoqiu was just about to walk out of the main hall when she was stopped by Jun Changshao. She turned around and asked, Patriarch, is there anything else? Go Sheng walked over and said, do you know the difference between you and Xingxing? Xingxing? Li Luoqiu was stunned. No, I don't. Jun Changshao's expression suddenly became serious. The difference is that Xingxing is in the sky, but you are in my heart. Li Luoqiu's eyes widened. The patriarch went to Fishery Province of the East Sea. Was his brain kicked by a donkey? Why did he suddenly say such mushy words that gave her goosebumps? Jun Changshao asked, how is it? Do you feel moved? Because of the overflow of contribution points, he browsed the mall on the way back and casually bought a book called Complete Collection of Cheesy Words of Love. The first sentence of the book said that it was an essential tool for flirting with girls, and the success rate was as high as 99%. So ridiculous. Jun Changshao was a little skeptical. So when he came here, he read it when he had nothing to do. Today, he used Hall Master Li as an experiment to see if it was as magical as the book said. Li Luoqiu was silent for a while. Then she covered her mouth and laughed. Patriarch, don't you think you are silly? Obviously, Gosheng turned cheesy words of love into cheesy jokes, which successfully amused Hall Master Li, who used to be a killer. Jun Changshao held his head and roared in his heart, sure enough, the book is a lie. The system said, no, the host only belongs to 0.1%. Get lost. After the meeting, Jun Changshao entered the space-time secret realm. When he walked out of it, he was completely recovered. Then, he went to the courtyard where the foreign guests were received. Master Fan. Jun Changshao sat down and said with a smile, are you used to living here? Fan Yezi was speechless. This patriarch of the sect of all times whom he had never heard of saved him. He thanked him again and again, but after returning to the continent, he was not allowed to get off the ship until he was brought to the sect of all times and settled down here. Why did it feel like he was under house arrest? Jun Patriarch. Fan Yezi cupped his hands and said, your sect's heaven and earth attributes are very strong, and the environment is good. It's really a place with good feng shui. If that's the case, then don't leave. Jun Changshao said with a smile. Fan Yezi was dumbfounded. Master Fan. Jun Changshao's expression suddenly became serious, and said, my sect of all time smithing hall is lacking a hall master. If you don't mind, Jun Patriarch. Fan Yezi hurriedly interrupted, this fan is indifferent to fame and fortune, and the world is my home. I am not qualified for the position of hall master. Please find someone else. As a master who was obsessed with smithing, what he yearned for was to be free and unfettered. Naturally, he would not join a sect. Don't you want to think about it? Jun Changshao said. Fan Yezi cupped his hands and said, Jun Patriarch has saved this fan. This fan is very grateful. If there is a chance in the future, this fan will repay you well. This sentence was obviously a refusal, and it was obvious that he was planning to leave. After being trapped in the fishery province of the East Ocean for decades, he had a lot of things to do now that he was finally back. For example, he had to visit his old flame and his family and friends. Fine. Jun Changshao said, Qingyang, I'll send Master Fan down the mountain. In terms of recruiting talents, he had always adhered to the principle of not forcing people. Yes. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji walked over, each holding one of Fan Yezi's arms and lifting him up. Guys, isn't the mountain gate over there? Where are you taking me to? You'll know when we get there. Okay. Creak. Creak. In the cell, Master Fan's expression became interesting. Earlier, he felt that he was under house arrest, but now, he was really imprisoned because he refused Jun Changshao's recruitment. Zhao Daodu said delightedly, another new cellmate. Old man. How did you get in? Master Fan stood up, grabbed the iron bars in front of the cell door, and shouted, Jun Patriarch, why did you lock me up? Stop shouting. Zhao Daodu lay on the wooden bed and said, as long as you are locked in the cell, you will never be able to leave unless you agree to Jun Patriarch's request or pay a ransom. What a painful realization. Master Fan sat down dejectedly, looked up and sighed, I just escaped the tiger's den and entered the wolf's den. At this point, there were 4 prisoners in the Sect of All-Time's cell. They were Chicken Soup for the Soul Zhao Daodu, Brother Green Scarf, the greatest King Yuan Gongzi, and Master Fan who was indifferent to fame and fortune. Then there was a problem. Who would be the first to leave prison? Chapter 1062. In the study. Jun Changshao took out the aptitude modification liquid and said, I can finally upgrade my spiritual root to divine grade. His spiritual root aptitude hadn't been upgraded since he entered the divine grade. Now that he was rewarded with a bottle of aptitude modification liquid after completing the hidden mission, he couldn't be happier. He uncorked the bottle and drank it. In an instant, Jun Changshao's blood, meridians, and other aspects changed dramatically. The spiritual energy in his spiritual core was also purer than before. When the spiritual root aptitude improved, the strength of a martial artist would also increase to different degrees. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, Jun Changshao's aura erupted and instantly filled the entire study. Ding! The host has successfully broken through to 2nd grade Wusheng. Ding! The host has successfully broken through to 2nd grade Sword Saint. Why is it only 1 grade? Jun Changshao yearned for the feeling of continuously upgrading after taking the aptitude modification liquid for the first time. The system said, if you hadn't crushed a few experience talismans before, you might not have advanced even if you have a divine grade spiritual root. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, the higher the grade, the harder it is to advance. Right. There are still 4 experience talismans left. He waved his hand and took them out. However, after crushing them all, although his strength increased slightly, his grade was still at 2nd grade. Jun Changshao was speechless. How many experience talismans do I need to break through to 3rd grade? At least 6, 7, 8, or 9, the system said. Why didn't it tell him everything from 1 to 9? Jun Changshao carefully sensed the changes brought to him by the divine grade spiritual root and sighed. From a low-grade spiritual root to one of the strongest spiritual roots in the falling star continent, this journey can be said to be like walking through fire and water. Of course. He said firmly, the divine grade spiritual root is just the beginning. I still want to become the strongest person in the world and cultivate harder. Change your cultivation to a cheat, the system complained. During this trip to the Eastern Sea Fishery Province, Jun Changshao not only upgraded his spiritual root to divine grade, but also obtained a lot of martial arts resources. Especially ores, there were a lot of them. Emperor Jinwei collected a lot of ores and used them to forge equipment. Xiao Ziji got busy early in the morning because he had enough materials for many of the equipment in the forging pavilion. The Dragon Tooth series weapons could be mass-produced. In the beginning, Jun Changshao had to personally handle the matter of refining equipment. Now that he had handed it over to his disciple, he was undoubtedly closer to being a hands-off shopkeeper. Supremely Fire Art. Looking through Emperor Jinwei's spatial ring, Jun Changshao found a secret manual with a fiery red cover. This was a fire element martial art that had reached the level of low divine grade. Once one's comprehension reached a certain level, they would be able to condense a supreme parting fire inside their body. It can be used for cultivation. Jun Changshao flipped through the book carefully. Because his spirit root had improved, and he had the holy flame and the 5 elements physique, it was easy for him to understand the meaning of the chant. Of course, cultivating step by step would definitely consume a lot of time. AI. Left with no other choice, Jun Changshao crushed an insight talisman and entered a state of rapid cultivation. The supremely fire art didn't belong to the merchant shop, so it wasn't a problem to comprehend it with the insight talisman. Therefore, it only took half an hour to reach major completion. Whoosh! He opened his palm and supreme parting fire rose. Emperor Jinwei was probably crying his heart out at this moment. After all, it took him decades to cultivate such a high-level martial art. Now, there was someone who could comprehend it in half an hour. With an additional flame, the power of the fire element should be stronger. Jun Changshao didn't test it too much and continued to look through the spatial ring. Emperor Jinwei had a lot of private goods, but what really interested him were the various martial arts manuals. After all, he could use them to exchange for martial arts in the technique pavilion. To be honest, Gosheng didn't care about the martial arts of the Falling Star continent at all. If it wasn't for the supremely fire art being compatible with his physique, he wouldn't even bother to use an insight talisman to cultivate it. Patriarch. Li Qingyang walked in and said, "Master Fan, are you really going to keep him locked up?" Jun Changshao said, "Inform Du to prepare a sumptuous dinner for Master Fan. I don't believe that the people locked up by me are all as unyielding as Brother Green Scarf." Yes. Li Qingyang came to the cafeteria. After Lu Wancher learned of the situation, she hurriedly prepared the dishes recommended by the Chinese cookbook. Who the fuck could withstand this? Creak. The door opened and Black 1 and Black 2 walked in with all kinds of dishes. The room was immediately filled with the fragrance, making Zhao Daodu drool. Dai Lu, who seemed to be reflecting on his mistakes, frowned slightly. During this period, he ate too much food from the sect of all times, but he still maintained his unyielding character. Yuan Gongzi and Master Fan, who just came in, hadn't eaten it before. So when the fragrance of the dishes floated over, their appetite was immediately aroused. You too. Jun Changshao sat down and said with a smile, "Come and eat." Shwa! Shwa! Yuan Gongzi and Master Fan didn't stand on ceremony. They swaggered over and picked up their chopsticks to eat. When the delicious food hit their taste buds again and again, their souls gradually rose into the sky and unfolded the magic of love in the sky. Zhao Daodu curled up in a corner and swallowed her saliva. She secretly prayed that these two wouldn't eat everything clean like Dai Lv. In any case, they should at least leave a small bite for her. It was a pity. After a sweeping meal, the dishes were all eaten. The degree of cleanliness of the plate was as if it had been licked back and forth several times. Zhao Daodu said with tears in his eyes, "They're too much." You too. Jun Changshao crossed his arms and said with a smile, "The taste is good, right?" Master Fan praised, "It's delicious." Yuan Gongzi remained silent, but in his heart, he was shocked. He was shocked that the food in the sect of all times was so good. He and his disciple were so monstrous. Could it be that they were raised like this? As long as the two of you join the sect of all times, you can enjoy all the delicious food in the world. Jun Changshao said. Tsk Dai Lu, with his shiny head, snorted in disdain. Using delicious food to tempt others, this method was simply too low. Jun Patriarch. Master Fan seriously rejected again, "I'm used to living a carefree life. It's hard for me to get used to being bound to the sect." Jun Changshao said, It's okay. After a while, you'll get used to it. Master Fan shook his head and said, June Patriarch, I won't join the sect of all times. Very manly. Very firm and unyielding. Dai Lu, who had been facing the wall, said calmly, June Changshao, in this world, anyone with a backbone will not succumb to your food. Okay. June Changshao waved at Black 1 and Black 2. The two quickly moved forward and collected all the empty plates. Paw! 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 One by one, weapons appeared on the table. June Changshao stretched out his hand and said, Master Fan, these weapons were all made by June. You're an expert in this field. Why don't you evaluate them? Oh? Master Fan's eyes lit up, and then he hurriedly took the low-grade cold-edged sword in his hand. He felt a slight chill from it and said in surprise, could this be made from cold iron? An expert is an expert. June Changshao said, I can tell at a glance. Master Fan evaluated the middle-grade cold-edged sword, cloud-piercing blade, True Yang sword, dragon tooth blade, and other weapons. Finally, he said in disbelief, these weapons were really made by June Patriarch? In the ancient times, the sect of all times had a couple called Ganjiang and Imo Xia. They were proficient in the art of forging and left behind secret manuals. June didn't have any talent in this field and only learned 10 to 20%, so Master Fan, please don't laugh. Ganjiang and Imo Xia. Fan Yezi tried hard to think, but he couldn't remember that there were such people in the Falling Star continent. Of course. June Changshao said, if Master Fan is willing to be the head of the sect of all times forging hall, you can naturally read the secret manuals that have been sealed for tens of thousands of years. Fan Yezi's expression changed slightly. He finally understood why the other party wanted him to look at the weapons. It was to force him to submit. Okay. Without much consideration, Master Fan said decisively, I'll join the sect of all times. Plop. Dai Lu, who was facing the wall, fell off the wooden bed and roared madly in his heart, you're surrendering just like that. You're surrendering just like that. Has your backbone been eaten by a dog? Chapter 1063. Fan Yezi gave in. Not because the rice was delicious, but because of the weapons. As an expert in forging, he could see that the craftsmanship of the cold-edged sword and cold ray sword was impeccable. Even if he was the one forging it, he might not be able to reach this level. An expert. An absolute expert. However, this was only 20% of the secret manual that Ganjiang Moxie left behind. Fan Yezi was completely shocked. He was completely fooled. If he learned the secret manual of the couple, his forging skills would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Although Fan Yezi was praised as the #1 forging master, he did not think that he had reached the peak of forging. He always had the heart of an apprentice. In fact, Go Sheng had taken out a bit too many weapons. With just the elementary grade cold-edged sword, coupled with his bluffing, he could make Master Fan surrender. Therefore, having a backbone was not scary. What was scary was using the right medicine. Creak. The cell door opened and the warm sunlight shone in. Under the gaze of Dai Lu, Zhao Daodu and Yuan Gongzi, Fan Yezi was the first to leave the cell. He was also the last to enter and the first to leave. The three of you. He stopped in front of the cell door and said, it is fate that we can be cellmates. We will meet again in the future. Dai Lu's eyes flashed with anger. I don't have a cowardly cellmate like you. Goodbye, never again. Zhao Daoda was envious. He secretly thought that if June Patriarch took the initiative to recruit him, he would definitely agree without hesitation. On the same day, Fan Yezi became the master of the forging hall. Therefore, the shock began. Because many of the outer disciples in the sect were equipped with cold-edged sword and cold ray sword. Oh my god! These weapons are all the same in terms of craftsmanship. It is as if they were made from the same mold. Fan Yezi strolled around the sect. Every time he met a disciple and appraised a weapon, his expression would constantly change. Of course. The so-called forging not only referred to weapons, but also equipment and protective gear. The inner sect disciples were wearing the true Yang set and were sparring on the training grounds. Just as the sparring was getting intense, Master Fan suddenly rushed in and stood in front of the disciple. Both of his hands stroked the disciple's body and said in astonishment, "Perfect. Perfect." In the following days, the disciples of the sect of all times were very depressed. This was because Hall Master Fan would appear in front of them and caress their weapons and equipment with his loving palms. It was to the point of intoxication. Ah! In the latrine, a male disciple who was taking a dump ran out while holding up his pants. He broke down and shouted, "Why is he here?" Fan Yezi's obsession with smithing drove him crazy. Every time he appraised a piece of equipment from the sect of all times, he would feel deeply ashamed. However, after a few days of research on the equipment and weapons, he discovered a flaw. Patriarch. Inside the hall, Fan Yezi said in a deep tone, "Although the equipment you forged is perfect, after my observation over the past few days, it's still lacking something." "What's missing?" "You're missing." Fan Yezi paused for a moment and said gravely, "Your soul." Jun Changshao was startled. Fan Yezi said, "Every weapon is inseparable from the smithing master's tempering, so after it is formed, there will be a kind of soul. However, I can't feel the existence of a soul from the equipment forged by the Patriarch. Although the Cold Edge Sword and the Cold Ray Sword are considered top-notch among the same quality, because they lack a trace of soul, there are still flaws." Of course. This kind of flaw is not fatal. But if it is someone who truly has a special feeling for the weapon, because there is no soul, it will affect the use of the weapon, and it will not even be able to display the most perfect state. The Cold Edge Sword and the Cold Ray Sword were all from the smithing pavilion. The quality and workmanship were impeccable, but after all, they were similar to machine production and had not been tempered by the smithing master. To put it bluntly, there was definitely a difference between machine work and manual work. Jun Changshao said, "I am also aware of this problem, but due to the limitations of my ability, I am unable to solve it. I wonder if Hall Master Fan has a way." "Yes," Fan Yezi said. Jun Changshao was overjoyed, and said, "What way?" "This Fan's comprehension of martial arts is not high, but I have a little talent in the way of forging. Combined with hundreds of years of forging, I have already condensed the forging chi." Fan Yezi said. Forging chi. Cultivating martial arts has the chi of martial arts, cultivating the sword has the chi of sword. Even a scholar can gather the chi of a scholar, and the forging chi is related to forging. Jun Changshao understood. Fan Yezi said, "If these weapons forged by the Patriarch are supported by the forging chi, and then slightly remodeled, they can be infused with the soul. Although the power will not increase significantly, it can allow the user to be more compatible with it, and achieve the true unity of man and weapon." Professional. Too fucking professional. Jun Changshao said, "The weapons forged by this seat, especially the Cold Edge Sword, almost every disciple has one. It will take a long time to refine and infuse the soul, right?" "Not long." Fan Yezi said proudly, "With this Fan's forging chi, it is not difficult to reforge 100 swords a day." 100 swords a day. 100 days would be 10,000 swords. All these years, he had only forged a few 100,000 swords. Wouldn't it be done in 3 to 5 years? Moreover, there was the space-time secret realm that could allow him to go in and reforge. The speed of infusing the soul would only be faster. Since that is the case, Jun Changshao clapped and said, "Then what are we waiting for? Hall Master Fan, begin to reforge and infuse the soul." Fan Yezi said, "This Fan can't wait." The weapons forged by Jun Changshao were perfect in terms of quality and workmanship, but they lacked the soul. This caused his obsessive-compulsive disorder to erupt, and he had to completely fix the flaw. Forging Hall. Ho. An aura different from martial arts gradually gathered in the room and wrapped around the Cold Edge Sword that was suspended in the air. It then penetrated deeply. Is this the forging qi? Jun Changshao, who was watching from the side, was shocked. Xiao. After a while, the cold-edged sword that was enveloped by the forging qi landed lightly and was placed on the forging table. Fan Yezi, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes. His hands were crossed, and his beard was dancing freely under the airwaves. Buzz buzz buzz. The forging qi that was released suddenly split into two, and then condensed into the shape of a hammer. It began to strike the cold-edged sword again and again, and a faint tinkling sound could be heard. Damn! Jun Changshao said in shock, you can even play like this? I've learned a lot. In ancient times, there were qi into wings, qi into horses, and qi into cows. Today, there was Fan Yezi's qi into hammers. The two hammers struck the cold-edged sword again and again, and the forging qi on the surface gradually seeped in and fused with the sword body. A moment later, Fan Yezi retracted the forging qi. The cold-edged sword's reconstruction was complete. The sword body was enveloped in flowing light, as if it was brand new. Amazing, amazing. Jun Changshao gave a thumbs up. Sigh. Fan Yezi sighed, and said, my understanding of the forging technique has already reached its limit, and I can still reach a higher level in my lifetime. Not to mention infusing the soul into the weapon, even the spirit will not be a problem. Jun Changshao opened his eyes wide, and said, artifact spirit can also be injected? Fan Yezi said, this is the level of perfection of the forging Tao. There are records of it in the ancient books, but unfortunately, no one in the Falling Star continent has touched it. Jun Changshao comforted him, as long as this level exists in this world, with Master Fan's strength, he will be able to reach it one day. Ha ha ha. Fan Yezi laughed out loud, and said, I'll take advantage of the patriarch's auspicious words. There was a bit of bitterness and helplessness in his laughter, because he knew that if there was truly such a level of forging, with his comprehension, he would never be able to comprehend it in his entire life, because that level was definitely not inferior to breaking through the void and ascending to the upper realm. Chapter 1064. Whoosh! Whoosh! On the training field, Jun Changshao performed the 9 forms of the wave-stacking sword, creating layers of sword shadows that were as smooth as flowing water. So cool! Patriarch looks like he's dancing. The disciples standing nearby exclaimed. Clang! After a while, Jun Changshao stopped and sheathed his sword. The cold-edged sword that Hall Master Fan has infused with his soul is indeed more useful than before. In the sword test just now, he could feel that the sword was connected to him, especially when he performed sword moves. The improvement in all aspects was very obvious. If all the disciples were equipped with this kind of weapon, their overall strength would definitely be stronger. Jun Changshao thought that the biggest gain from this trip to the Eastern Seas Fishery Province was Emperor Jinwei's interspatial ring and various martial arts resources in the treasury. Now it seemed. Master Fan was the real priceless treasure. Qingyang. Jun Changshao waved his hand and threw the reconstructed cold-edged sword over. Test the sword. Yes. Li Qingyang flew over from afar, holding the sword hilt, and landed lightly on the training field. Then, he performed the 9 forms of the wave-stacking sword until the 9th form was gathered, forming an unparalleled sword qi that slashed down. Boom! The ground cracked, and sword marks appeared. Patriarch. Li Qingyang stood with the sword and said in surprise, this sword seems to be more useful than before. The next second, his smile froze. Looking at the floor that he had destroyed, he clutched his chest in pain. The second disciple couldn't help but destroy the training field that he had built himself. It was obvious how useful the cold-edged sword was. Fan Yezi didn't rest. He had entered a state of intoxication on the reconstructed weapons. In fact, this guy was also a lunatic like Emperor Jinwei, but he was crazy about forging. In just a few days, hundreds of cold weapons were reconstructed and infused with love and souls. The disciples all held the cold-edged sword that had been infused with souls. Whether it was during daily practice or sparring, they could feel a subtle connection with the weapon. Of course. The most obvious effects were the cloud-piercing sword, black iron shield, and other defensive equipment. It was indeed as Jun Changshao thought. Fan Yezi was the real priceless treasure. His arrival and the remodeling of the weapons and equipment had greatly increased the combat power of the sect of all times. If it was just for an individual, the effect might not be outstanding. However, if 70,000 disciples were to equip equipment with souls, the overall improvement would be very significant. And these were only the basic level weapons and equipment. The higher level True Yang Set and Dragon Tooth series weapons were all waiting for Fan Yezi to inject his soul into them. At that time, the upgrade ratio would be even higher. I've earned it, I've earned it. Jun Changshao felt extremely lucky that he was able to go to the East Ocean Fishery Province and save Master Fan at the cost of a large number of chapters, because the help that Master Fan brought to the sect was continuous and permanent. He had to thank Elder Wei and the others. If he hadn't suggested that the Patriarch go and rescue them, with Go Xing's aloof personality, he might have been too lazy to go out to sea. Therefore, in a large and professional sect, the Patriarch might not be able to consider many things thoroughly. The role and suggestions of the higher-ups were equally important. Other than being extremely handsome, Jun Changshao was not a perfect person. Elder Wei and the other higher-ups would make up for his shortcomings when necessary, but they would not be careless when it came to important matters. Only in this way could they truly create the strongest sect of all time. In the smithing hall, Jun Changshao took out his finger of empire and placed it on the smithing table. He said, "Can I inject my soul into this item?" The system, this exclusive divine weapon, was already wretched enough. If a soul was injected, wouldn't it be as wretched as the sun in the sky? Fan Yezi walked forward and took the strangely shaped finger of empire in his hand. His eyes widened and he was extremely shocked. He said, that's right. Jun Changshao said, "Above divine grade." Plop! Fan Yezi directly fell to the ground, his hands trembling violently. He said, "The Patriarch can actually forge weapons above divine grade." With his current level, he could only forge weapons of divine grade, and that required powerful ores. As for weapons above divine grade, it was not that he had not tested it before, but he failed in the Eastern Sea Fishery Province. Jun Changshao said, "This was forged by Senior Ganjiang and Senior Moxie when they were alive." That's right. The system said, "Have some shame." I see. Fan Yezi's fluctuating heart calmed down a lot. If a young man in his early 20s could forge weapons above divine grade, it would be too shocking. The Patriarch. Fan Yezi carefully sized it up and said, "This weapon's workmanship is still impeccable, but it still lacks a soul. As for whether it can be injected with a soul, I'll have to try to find out." Then let's try. It might take a long time. Remodeling high-level equipment required more energy, unlike Cold Edge, which could be mass-produced by hundreds of weapons a day. Fan Yezi was dumbfounded and shocked again. Because he was in the space-time arcane realm, and learned from the Patriarch that there was a time acceleration here. 50 days inside was only 1 day outside. Paw! He slapped his face, and after feeling the pain, he said, "It's not a dream, it's not a dream." Sigh, after entering the sect of all times, except for remodeling weapons, he spent the rest of his time in shock. It was really difficult for him. Hall Master Fan. Jun Changshao said, "I'll leave this weapon to you." Okay. Master Fan hurriedly released his forging energy, and then condensed a total of 5 hammers, and then worked day and night. Injecting a soul into a weapon above divine grade was indeed very difficult. It took a whole month to succeed, and the results were not ideal. Patriarch. Fan Yezi handed over the Pointer of Nations, and shook his head, "My ability is limited, and I can barely reforge it a little." Jun Changshao smiled and said, "It's mainly because Hall Master Fan lacks materials to practice. Practice makes perfect. Come, I have a few divine-grade weapons here, you can use them to practice." He took out the Heavenly Slaughter Lightning Rune, Cloud Dream Hero's Secret and Hell Rage. Fan Yezi almost fainted from happiness. Then, he squatted on the casting table and slapped his own face like crazy. He was regretting that he had repeatedly rejected Jun Changxiao's sincere invitation. If the other party didn't lock him up and let him go, he would have missed out on so many weapons, not to mention remodeling them. Fan Yezi. You're really a bastard, you almost made a huge mistake. Paw. The sound of knocking and slapping intertwined, outlining a very beautiful and moving rhythm. After handing over Li Qingyang and the others' exclusive divine weapons to Fan Yezi, Jun Changxiao began to think about how to deal with Yuan Gongzi. This person went to the East Sea Fishery Province to join Emperor Jinwei and build a great career. Got it. Jun Changxiao's eyes lit up, and then he walked into the cell and dragged Yuan Gongzi out without asking for the reason. Jun Changxiao. If you want to kill me, can't you give me a more dignified death? Don't drag me like a dead dog. Yuan Gongzi roared angrily. I'll take you to a fun place, Jun Changxiao said with a smile. A fun place? Yuan Gongzi was confused, and then he saw a vortex of light similar to an array formation in front of him, emitting a gloomy aura. Is this hell? Whoosh! While he was thinking, Jun Changxiao dragged him into hell. Oh, no, it was the dimensional battlefield. Fan Yezi, the right medicine. Young Master Yuan, you also need to take the right medicine. Chapter 1065. Dimensional Battlefield, Falling Star Continent's Stronghold. Yuan Gongzi stood on the main peak and looked at the magnificent city below. He couldn't recover from the shock for a long time. This place used to be a wasteland. Thanks to the hard work of our sect of all times, we have today's scale and the strength to intimidate the other dimensions. Jun Changxiao, who was sitting behind him, spoke with absolute arrogance. Although the storyline of the dimensional battlefield had completely ended, he had put in a lot of effort into the stronghold. Occasionally coming over to take a look would fill him with pride. This place, Yuan Gongzi said in disbelief, it's really the dimensional battlefield? Whoosh whoosh. Spiritual energy erupted and enveloped him. Whoosh! Jun Changxiao dragged Yuan Gongzi out of the stronghold of Falling Star Continent and flew toward the dimensional battlefield. Then, they passed by one dimension after another. Some things couldn't be said with words. Only seeing was believing. Seeing those powerful martial auras and martial artists dressed differently from those of Falling Star Continent, although Yuan Gongzi tried his best to force himself to believe that it was fake, he was gradually accepting the truth in the depths of his heart. Whoosh! Jun Changxiao brought him back to the stronghold of Falling Star Continent. He sat on the chair again and said, "You probably don't know yet, but the first batch of experts who entered here has already returned." Yuan Gongzi didn't know because City Lord Han and the others had returned to the continent and were now in the East Sea, experiencing all kinds of hardships. Old Yuan. Jun Changxiao interlocked his fingers and said, "You are a talented person. Under your management, the Demon Emperor's Gate can compete with the famous righteous sections. That is enough to prove yourself. A group of useless teammates can't help you achieve higher achievements. Why don't you come and help me build the strongest sect that can beat all dimensions?" Yuan Gongzi was silent. When he was the deputy sect master of the Demon Emperor's Gate, his dream was to unify the Falling Star Continent and restore the Demon Emperor's Gate to its former glory. This guy opened his mouth and said that he could beat all dimensions. His level was simply too high. Was that even possible? Yuan Gongzi had thought that this guy was just bluffing before he saw the super-large cities on the Falling Star Continent. But now, he couldn't help but think that this guy might really succeed. From fighting against the major sects of the Falling Star Continent to fighting against the powerful existential planes, just the thought of it made one's blood boil. Calm down. Calm down. Don't be bewitched by him. You must have a backbone. Old Yuan. Jun Changxiao said, "If we men want to do something big, we must have a big picture. We can't just limit ourselves to the Falling Star Continent. Yuan Gongzi said, I don't have such unrealistic ambitions like Jun Patriarch. No, you do. Jun Changshao said seriously, it's just that we lack king teammates. Indeed, Yuan Gongzi's teammates in the Demon Emperor's Gate, even if they were all martial emperors, would only be delivering their heads and dragging them down if they went to compete with the various dimensions. In the Sect of all times, everyone is a king. Jun Changshao said, as long as you join us, we'll achieve great things. Jun Patriarch, Yuan Gongzi wanted to cry but had no tears. What do you see in me? Can I change it now? Jun Changshao stood up and walked in front of him. He lit up his electronic cigar, took a puff, and blew out a smoke ring. What I see is that you used to be the deputy sect master of the Demon Emperor's Gate. Because I'm the deputy patriarch of the Sect of all times, that position is still empty. He needed such a talent to develop a hidden sect to the point where it could contend with the famous sections. It was also the most important factor for him to walk the path of leaving everything to others. Sect of all times, deputy patriarch. Yuan Gongzi's expression gradually became sluggish. This guy thought so highly of him that he actually gave him the absolute power to be second only to one person. Have you heard of the soul race? Jun Changshao asked. No. The soul race had caused chaos in ancient times, and the current generation of martial artists knew very little about it. Jun Changshao said, 10,000 years ago, the Great War between the emperors caused the world to collapse, and it was all because of this race. They are cruel invaders, and even today, they still have designs on the falling star continent. Yuan Gongzi, what does this have to do with you persuading me to join the Sect of all times? I've been looking for a way to enter the soul race's continent. If I find it, I'll bring my disciples in and give them a taste of their own medicine, Jun Changshao said with a cold gaze. Yuan Gongzi's eyes widened. That's right. Jun Changshao turned to look at him with the cigar in his mouth and said, when that day comes, the Sect of all times will charge out of Asia. Out of the falling star continent, and officially open the prelude to the war with the other planes. Yuan Gongzi's heart was in turmoil. Just thinking about charging out of the falling star continent and fighting with the other planes made his blood boil again. When the time comes. Jun Changshao said seriously, I hope to have your help and your company. You might think that I'm talking nonsense. Jun Changshao released his spirit energy again and dragged him away domineeringly. Then, he returned to the Sect of all times. Standing on the main peak of the war cavalry hall, he pointed at the wolf riders who were setting up a formation on the field and said, but I'll tell you that the Sect of all times has the strength to fight with any plane. Whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh. Zhong Yi raised the dragon-tooth blade, and the members of the wolf riders riding on the hurricane wolves unleashed their cultivation. Although there were only a few thousand of them, they were all at the king level, and their aura was quite shocking. Yuan Gongzi was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. This was the first time he saw a well-equipped army with high-level ferocious beasts as mounts, and their strength was at the martial king level. Roar! Roar! At the entrance of the field, a large number of disciples rushed over. Their mounts were either tiger beasts or lion beasts, and their powerful auras were unprecedentedly strong. So, this was the overall strength of the Sect of all times. Yuan Gongzi's eyes were filled with bitterness. On the way to the East Sea, he had concluded that he was not as good as Jun Changshao, and the reason was that this guy was strong and had a group of monstrous disciples and higher-ups. Now, it seemed that if he really wanted to fight, just this army of ferocious beasts would be enough to flatten the crossing Spirit Valley and the Demon Emperor's Gate. To be honest, Jun Changshao had blackmailed the martial artists of the Falling Star Continent, the martial artists of other planes, and even the Demon Emperor's Gate several times. He had obtained a large amount of martial arts resources and used them all for development, and the Sect of all times' strength was increasing every day. In the entire Falling Star Continent, the top sects could not compete with them. However, this was only the strength of the War Cavalry Hall. The outer sect disciples were far superior to the disciples of other sects in terms of cultivation, physical strength, and even martial arts. If it really developed into a war between sects, There would be casualties, but they would be crushed. Gou Sheng had no intention of fighting for supremacy. If he really wanted to achieve great feats, Emperor Jinwei and the Demon Emperor's Gate could all stand aside. Old Yuan. Jun Changshao said, "You are a sensible person, and a sensible person should make a sensible choice. Can you not call me Old Yuan? I'm only in my 20s. I'm also in my 20s, and this is the age for us to achieve great feats. Come, assist me in achieving great feats in this vast universe." Creak. The prison cell closed again. Yuan Gongzi silently faced the wall on the wooden bed. The stronghold of the falling star continent in the planar battlefield and the various beast armies of the war cavalry hall had shocked him too much, so much so that he was still in a daze. Zhao Daodu analyzed, he should have thought it through soon. Dai Lu said, "This person is as unyielding as I am. He will not give in easily." Smack! Smack! Suddenly, Yuan Gongzi disappeared from the wooden bed. He had already arrived in front of the prison cell. He grabbed the iron bars with both hands and said loudly, "Jun Patriarch, I have thought it through. I am willing to join the Sect of all times. I am willing to assist you in achieving great feats." Dai Lu was instantly petrified. Ah! This guy's backbone was eaten by a dog. Young Master Elder Lin, who was temporarily staying in the courtyard for foreign guests, heard this. A smile appeared on his weathered face, and tears gradually filled his eyes. Chapter 1066. Jun Changshao might not be a qualified patriarch, but he was definitely a qualified lobbyist. After Master Fan, who was indifferent to fame and fortune, the greatest King Yuan Gongzi also fell and was successfully tricked by him. The newly formed F4 Sect of all times cell group disbanded after a few days of existence. Now, only chicken soup for the soul, Zhao Daodu, and unyielding Brother Green Scarf were left. Sigh. Looking at the two empty wooden beds, Zhao Daodu sighed and said, "Who can understand my loneliness?" Dai Lu clenched his fists, anger burning in his heart. He originally thought that those two people would have the same backbone as him, but in the end, they surrendered after 2 moves. It was really disappointing. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. No matter how glib that Jun Changxiao's tongue is, Dai Lu will continue to persevere and never give in. At that moment, the back of his shiny head was suddenly hit with the unyielding brother special effect. Of course. Brother Green Scarf took it for granted. After Jun Changshao convinced Yuan Gongzi, he didn't even consider him. He planned to continue to lock him up and let him fend for himself. The main thing was that Gou Sheng knew that this kid's backbone had reached 100%. If he wanted to subdue him, he couldn't do without the right time, place, and people. He could only find an opportunity in the future. Kid! As long as you're in the Sect of all times cell, I'll turn you gay sooner or later. Sect of all times. In front of the main Peaks Hall. More than 70,000 disciples gathered in the training field. Elder Wei, Jiangye, and other sect higher-ups were all present. Everyone. Jun Changshao walked out and said, "Please give a warm round of applause to welcome our Sect of all times Deputy Patriarch Yuan Feng." Clap clap clap. Clap clap clap. All the disciples applauded with bright smiles on their faces. Elder Lin was also among them. After the young master agreed to join the Sect of all times, he was successfully recruited and appointed as an elder. Under the warm applause of everyone, Yuan Feng walked out wearing a custom-made uniform. The expression on his face was very interesting. Yesterday, he had asked Jun Changshao what he was responsible for as the deputy patriarch. In the end, Jun Changshao's answer was, "You just have to support me when you're free." Patriarch? Young Master Yuan stood rooted to the ground like a wooden chicken. Fuck. Wasn't he supposed to be the deputy patriarch? How did it become Fu? Sect. Lord. Besides, you're not an emperor, and I'm not a eunuch. Do we need to specially help each other out? After the last disciple Hiwudi, the sect of all times had another patriarch Fu. The main thing was that he still needed to undergo further tests. If he met the requirements, he would be officially conferred the position of deputy patriarch. AI. Yuan Feng sighed deeply. He could only accept the strange position of patriarch Fu. Of course, in terms of managing the sect, he was still very strong. After officially becoming a member of the sect of all times, he began to actively investigate. For example, how many disciples there were in the sect, the amount of resources, and even who was in charge of sweeping the floor and cleaning the toilets. The one who was the happiest about Yuan Gongzi's arrival was still Li Luoqiu. Jiangye, Elder Wei, and the others all had their own duties. Only she was able to take on the role of hall master of many halls. She was so busy every day. Now that a professional came to take care of the sect, it would definitely help her a lot. A few days later, Yuan Gongzi, who had a general understanding of the sect, came to the study and said, "Patriarch, I checked the sect's recent spending records and found that the money spent is too crazy." When he was in charge of the vice sect master of the Demon Emperor's Gate, he was famous for being a gold abacus. He was extremely strict in controlling spending. Even if the higher-ups sold a pair of shoes, they would have to record it. The situation in the sect of all times was different. There was no professional accountant here. The feed stores were all over the major states and made huge profits with a small capital, so they were often extravagant in spending. It was Chief Steward Li who was meticulous. The sect of all times might not even be able to produce a detailed account book. Jun Changshao said, "Our sect of all times has a lot of money. There's no need to be so calculative." "How can that be?" Yuan Gongzi took out a small abacus. His hands, which were whiter than a woman's, moved it crazily. He said, "The sect is extravagant in spending. We lose at least a few 100,000 taels of silver every month. It's not a small amount to exchange for spirit stones." Jun Changshao said to himself, "This brat is planning to sneak away. System, he's talking about the sect with you, but you're paying attention to the abacus. Are you really the sect master? Don't say it. He's trying to sneak away. Without hard work, it's impossible to do it so smoothly. What do you think?" Jun Changshao asked. Yuan Gongzi said with a serious expression, "Strictly control the spending of each hall every month. Use the money where it's needed, and not squander it recklessly." "Okay." Jun Changshao said, "I'll leave this to you." Yuan Gongzi said again, "There's also mid-level beast pills. These miraculous pills should be sold for more profit for the sect, and not given to the Spirit Beast Hall for no reason." The Purple King, who was in the Spirit Beast Hall, frowned and said to himself, "This is a bad omen. There's also Hall Master Z." Yuan Gongzi said, "He receives dozens of sect uniforms every month. He can't even change one set a day. Is he eating it as food? In my opinion, this kind of behavior that increases the sect spending for no reason must be punished to stop the extravagance." "Indeed." Jun Changshao said, "Hall Master Z is taking too many school uniforms. After all, he is a hall master, and there's a rule that he has to replenish the Spirit Beast Hall every month. The clothes can be converted into beast pills and deducted automatically." Yuan Gongzi said. The Purple King was restless. At this moment, he had a feeling that there's always a wicked person who wants to harm me. What? Deduct the amount of beast pills from my Spirit Beast Hall every month? In the Spirit Beast Hall, the Purple King stood up with a bang. His eyes were flashing with anger. Yuan Gongzi stood with his hands behind his back and said, "Hall Master Z receives quite a lot of sect uniforms every month, and he still has to deduct it from the beast pills. Based on what? Based on what?" The word "based" was emphasized, and his saliva splashed onto Yuan Gongzi's face. He raised his hand to wipe it off and said without changing his expression, "Based on the fact that your Spirit Beast Hall spends too much every month. From today onwards, you have to strictly control your spending and curb your extravagant and wasteful behavior." Boom! There was an explosion. Yuan Gongzi was sweating profusely as he stood up. The Purple King's fist was right next to his ear and smashed onto the pillar. His clothes were torn apart, and a majestic demonic aura filled the hall. "Kid, do you want to die?" Gulp. Yuan Gongzi swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to be calm. "The Patriarch has given me this authority, so I have to be loyal to my duty." Swish! The Purple King withdrew his fist and sat on the seat of honor. He said angrily, "I won't take any clothes in the future. I will give you all the beast pills that you deserve, not a single one less." Yuan Gongzi hurriedly slipped away. Just as he walked out of the Spirit Beast Hall, he wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. He was puzzled and thought, why did this guy destroy his clothes when he made a move? Could he be an exhibitionist? On the main peak, Jun Changshao was fishing in front of the fish pond. Then, he retracted his spiritual sense and smiled. He actually dared to touch the tiger's butt. This guy is really stupid when he does things. The system said, "I'm afraid this will arouse the Purple King's rebellious heart." Swish! Jun Changshao swung his rod and pulled the fish out of the water. He said, "So, this time, it depends on how I, the Patriarch, balance things out. Hall Master Z. Take these tens of thousands of beast pills." In the Spirit Beast Hall, Jun Changshao secretly stuffed the pills into the Purple King's hands. The system broke down. "This is your way of balance? You secretly gave them to the Spirit Beast Hall without paying? What else can I do?" Jun Changshao said. The system was completely speechless. Yuan Gongzi was establishing the Sect style of frugality, and the host secretly played this trick. This was definitely a greatest king leading a bronze noob. Chapter 1067. As soon as he jumped out of the black iron pit of the Demon Emperor's Gate, Yuan Gongzi stepped into Jun Changshao's bronze quagmire. Fortunately, he didn't know and was still loyal to his duty. Of course, Yuan Gongzi's role was not only to calculate and be stingy. As he became more and more integrated into the life of the sect of all times, he put forward a lot of good suggestions to improve the shortcomings of the sect. Especially on the business of the sect, he spent a few sleepless nights to rearrange the layout and wrote a reform plan of tens of thousands of words. Jun Changshao almost fell asleep after reading it. "Patriarch, what do you think?" Yuan Gongzi asked. Jun Changshao forced himself to wake up and said, "Very good, let's go according to your plan." He was really not good at these things. But he didn't need to doubt people, so he let Yuan Gongzi do it freely. He only needed to look at the monthly results. With the support of the Patriarch, Hall Master Fu began to plan and put it into action one after another. Because it involved a sect's trade secret, he didn't describe it in detail. Hall Master Fan. During this period of time, he had been injecting souls into the divine weapons of Li Qingyang and others. Although it was still difficult, with experience, it became more and more convenient. Just as Jun Changshao said, Fan Yezi lacked divine-grade equipment to practice. Once he had it, he would be able to slowly practice it. Phew! Lying on the chair in the study, his feet on the table, Jun Changshao said happily, "The Foundry Hall has a hall master and a suitable candidate for the deputy patriarch. We still lack a few protectors who can fight." The 4 protectors, a boorish man, ghost, and the others, who surrendered in the Demon Emperor's Gate, were only at the Emperor level. They could only be temporary fighters and couldn't provide top combat strength. Right. Jun Changshao slapped his forehead and said, "When we go to the East Sea Fishery Province, I promise to help Paige find the Earth Spirit Core." I actually forgot. The system said, "Poor little guy, he has no sense of existence in the host's heart." No. Jun Changshao stood up and said, "We have to look for it." This search wasn't in the wild, but in the Spirit Beast Hall. He summoned the King of 100 Hills, King of Tiger Strength, and King of Antlers, and ordered them to find the Earth Crystal Core as soon as possible. After giving his instructions, Jun Changshao walked into the main hall. Not long after he sat down, Yixingchen walked over and said, "Patriarch, when will I have a divine weapon?" "No rush, no rush." Jun Changshao said, "As long as you work hard for the sect and your fellow disciples, I will give you an exclusive divine weapon sooner or later." During this period of time, Knight Emperor's performance had been extremely good. The merit points of the Lingyan Pavilion had skyrocketed to 96 points, infinitely close to the maximum for the first stage. "Why don't you bestow the divine weapon that Patriarch obtained from Emperor Jinwei to me?" "Ah no. You've changed. Begging Gosheng for equipment. Wishful thinking." Jun Changshao said, "I still want to keep this divine weapon for my own use." The pointer was a divine weapon that was purely for entertainment. He needed a proper weapon to enrich himself, and Emperor Jinwei's spear was undoubtedly very suitable. Yixingchen didn't say anything and turned to leave. "Wait a minute." Jun Changshao said, "If you want to obtain an exclusive divine weapon faster, you can continue to challenge the Gathering of Heroes list." "Understood." Since the last time he went out to challenge the list, Yixingchen only entered the top 40 of the Earth Crystal Core. Later, he found that it was really not difficult, so he gave up the idea. Now that the Patriarch had given him a clear indication, he left the Sect of All Times early the next morning to continue the ranking battle. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Just as he went down the mountain, Xiao Ziji chased after him and said with a smile, "I'll go with you." Not long after the two left, Ning Duxing walked into the main hall and cupped his hands. "Patriarch, there's a middle-aged man outside, saying that he wants to join the Sect of All Times." Jun Changshao said, "Wait until the day of the assessment." Since the sect had set the rules to recruit at the beginning of every month, wouldn't it be like a market if they broke the rules so casually? "Patriarch," Ning Duxing said, "this may be a special talent." "Special talent?" Jun Changshao thought for a moment and said, "Then invite him in, I'll see how special he is." Ning Duxing hurriedly left. After a while, a middle-aged man with a decent appearance wearing brocade clothes strode in and cupped his hands. "I'm Lan Kong. Greetings to Jun Patriarch." Jun Changshao frowned. After this person came in, he brought with him an extremely strong smell of wine. Did he come to apply for the job after drinking? Sure enough, the opening was a bit special. Jun Changshao said, "Did you drink?" "No." Lan Kong smiled and said, "I'm a winemaker, so I'm full of the smell of wine." "Winemaker?" Jun Changshao smiled and said, "This profession is a bit interesting." Lan Kong cupped his hands and said, "I don't know if your sect has a winemaker, so I'm here to recommend myself." "Jun Patriarch, please accept me." The Sect of All Times didn't have a winemaker. Most of the wine for every sect gathering was bought from Qingyang town. Jun Changshao said with interest, "There are different grades of wine. What's the difference between the wine brewed by your excellency?" In fact, when Gosheng heard about this winemaker for the first time, he refused in his heart. "Because, you can't say that you want to join and I'll immediately let you join. First, I want to try because I don't want others to fish in troubled waters." Lan Kong waved his hand and took out a jar of wine from his space ring and said, "This is the wine brewed by me. Jun Patriarch, you can have a taste." "Paw!" He hit the clay seal with one hand, and the fragrance of the wine instantly filled the hall. Then, he walked towards the training field. "It smells so good. What wine is this?" The eyes of the disciples who were cultivating lit up when they smelled the refreshing fragrance of the wine. The disciples who didn't drink also had the thought of trying it after smelling it. Swoosh! Jun Changshao stepped on the chair with one foot, reached out his right hand, and sucked the open jar of wine over. Then, he raised his head and took a big gulp. Miao Saifeng, who just passed by the main hall, saw this and thought to herself, "Patriarch, aren't you afraid that the wine is poisoned?" After the wine entered his mouth, the fragrance lingered in his mouth. Jun Changshao put down the jar of wine, and after carefully tasting it, he praised, "Good wine." Lan Kong hurriedly said, "Jun Patriarch, this wine brewed by me is called Drunken Dream. Even people with good alcohol tolerance have to taste it carefully." If you take a big gulp like this, please use your spiritual energy to, plop. Before he could finish, Jun Changshao directly fell from the chair. He was drunk and unconscious. Swoosh! 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 As soon as he fell, Lu Qianqian, Li Qingyang, and the others instantly appeared in the main hall. The weapons in their hands were crisscrossed on Lan Kang's neck, and they looked like they were saying, "You little rascal, give me back my patriarch's life." Everyone. Lan Kang raised his hand and collapsed. Jun Patriarch is just drunk. He will wake up after a sleep. Sure enough. After sleeping for a few hours, Jun Changshao covered his head and opened his eyes. With a stunned face, he said, "What's the situation?" His memory stopped when he drank a mouthful of wine, and then it was completely broken. Jun Patriarch. Lan Kang raised his hand and said helplessly, "Your disciples used their swords to block me for a few hours. My legs and hands are numb." Jun Changshao hurriedly dismissed his disciples and exclaimed, "The wine brewed by you is really strong. I can be considered a drinker, but I can't even take a sip." Lan Kang smiled and said, "Jun Patriarch, didn't you notice any changes in your body after you woke up?" Changes? Jun Changshao was startled. He slightly sensed his body and his expression changed. "Every pore on my skin has expanded." "That's right." Lan Kang was already squatting on the chair at the side of the hall. His right hand was in a thinking position, and he faced the camera with the side of his face. He said seriously, "Drinking the drunken dream brewed by me can increase the speed of absorbing heaven and earth attributes for a certain period of time." Chapter 1068. After drinking a big mouthful of drunken dream, Jun Changshao not only discovered that his pores had expanded, but his comprehension of the heaven and earth attribute had also increased by a small margin. That was already very awesome. Go Sheng's spirit root had already reached the divine grade, which was the strongest in the falling star continent. There was an increase in level on this foundation, and it was through drinking. Talent. A talent like doo-doo. The food made by Lu Wancher could increase one's fighting strength. Now that there was someone who used wine to increase the speed of absorbing psionic energy, the falling star continent was truly a place where talents came forth in large numbers. Jun Changshao immediately decided, and said, "Welcome to the sect of all times." He would definitely not let go of such a special talent. What's more, the sect had a winemaker. In the future, when it came to parties, there was no need to go to Qingyang town to buy wine. Moreover, Go Sheng was thinking. Facing the drunken dream that could increase the speed of absorbing psionic energy, would Yi Anyo refuse, or would he choose to live separately from his bed for a long time? "I'm looking forward to it." Lan Kang cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Patriarch, for taking me in." As an expert who had been immersed in the way of wine for many years, after having the thought of joining a sect, the first thing he considered was the sect of all times, because he had been in the limelight recently. This was the embodiment of fame and reputation. At present, any talented person with ambition would often first consider the sect of all times when choosing a sect. Is this wine really that magical? After drinking it, it can increase the speed of absorbing the heaven and earth attribute? This is the first time I've heard of it. In the cafeteria, all the disciples sat at the dining table with a small cup of drunken dream in front of each of them. The refreshing fragrance of the wine made them impatient to drink it. "Don't just stand there," Jun Changshao said, "drink it all." "Yes." All the disciples raised their wine cups one after another, and then raised their heads to drink the fragrant drunken dream. "Wow!" Lu Wancher put down the cup and said happily, "It's so delicious." Lan Kang had said that if the amount of drunken dream was strictly controlled, it would be no different from drinking water, and it would not cause people to get drunk. Therefore, Jun Changshao allowed the little girl to drink it. Indeed. Lu Wancher took a small sip, and it was as if she was drinking a beverage. Not only was she not affected by the alcohol, but she also became more energetic. After the disciples drank it, their comprehension of the heaven and earth attribute instantly improved. Thus, they were all pleasantly surprised. This drunken dream is really effective. Let's go. Let's cultivate in the spirit gathering array. For a time, the spirit gathering arrays were overcrowded. Due to the increase in the number of disciples and the complete unsealing of the land of spirit chi recovery, the array formation hall master, Jindijuan, had already set up many arrays for the sect to cultivate. The effects of drunken stupor lasted for an entire day. Under this kind of support, the disciples worked hard to cultivate, and the results were clearly faster than before. Patriarch Lan Kong said, "If I drink a small cup of drunken dream every day, not only can I maintain my vitality for a long time, it can also prolong my life and have the effect of beautifying and whitening my skin." When the female reader heard this, she would definitely say, "Give me a car." Male reader, wake up, you don't have female readers. Then prepare more, Jun Changshao said. Hall Master Fan had injected souls into weapons, increasing the overall strength of the sect. Lan Kang's drunken stupor could also increase the cultivation speed of the sect. It would definitely be great. Lan Kong said helplessly, "This wine requires high-quality grains, and the brewing process is extremely complicated. It takes at least 3 years for a jar of wine to take shape. It's not a big problem." Jun Changshao brought him to the herb garden and said, "High-quality grains can be grown in high-grade soil." Lan Kong was stunned. After exploring the soil quality, he said happily, "If it's used to grow grains, the effect will definitely be excellent." In terms of the selection of brewing materials, he would occasionally go out to buy, but most of the time, he would grow them himself because it was difficult to meet the standards of brewing drunken stupor on the market. The land of the sect of all times belonged to the land of spirit chi recovery and had been improved by Page. It would definitely be very suitable to grow all kinds of brewing grains. The herb garden also had to be planted with herbs. Therefore, Jun Changshao divided a large piece of land in the adjacent area and said, "Grow grains here." "Of course. I will prepare the best grain seeds for you." Grains matured according to season, but in front of the seed-nurturing pond, it was nothing. As long as it could bring benefits to the sect, Jun Changshao would definitely support it without any hesitation. Everything was ready. Lan Kong began his job after joining the sect of all times, which was to be responsible for making as much drunken stupor as possible in the shortest time possible. Of course, even with the support of the soil and the seeds, it was destined to take time. Therefore, if the disciples wanted to be able to drink a small cup every day, they still had to wait patiently. Time passed. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Lan Kong had already integrated into the life of the sect of all times and was shocked by the growth speed of the grains. Many grains that required 1 or 2 seasons to mature would be ready in a month at this rate. This is simply too amazing. Fan Yezi was not idle either. He continued to inject souls into his exclusive divine weapon. The busiest person was Yuan Gongzi. As the patriarch of the sect, he was equivalent to the head of internal affairs and a professional manager. There were many things that needed to be arranged. Under his reforms, the extravagance of the sect of all times was curbed. Any use of money had to be recorded and accounted for. Although Yuan Gongzi appeared to be stingy, in the long run, it would definitely be beneficial to the sect of all times. As for the business of the sect, he was still actively making arrangements. He did not even hesitate to disguise himself and go to the great sage's imperial city to talk to second young Master Tang. After hiring this professional manager, the sect of all times could finally be considered to be a true professional. As for the benefits, they would slowly show themselves in the future. No. It was already showing now. After Hall Master Z was strictly restricted, he controlled his style of tearing his clothes apart. After all, if he damaged a set of school uniforms, he would have to deduct an equivalent mid-level beast core. A few more days passed. Yi Xingchen and Xiao Ziji returned. Jun Changshao opened the door to the Lingyan pavilion and found that Anyo's merit points had reached 100 points. He said in surprise, "Did you get to the top of the Earth list?" "That's right." In the past 20 days, Yi Xingchen continued to challenge people. His ranking on the Gathering of Heroes leaderboard kept rising until he reached the top of the Earth list. Because his strength had reached the 3rd rank, Wu Huang, the whole process of the battle was too easy. Since you've reached the merit points, let's move into the Lingyan Pavilion. After matching Yi Xingchen, the portrait engraved with his name gradually converged into a portrait. It was the portrait of him dancing with a wine jar in front of the bonfire after drinking too much. Pfft! Gou Xing burst out laughing. Yi Xingchen, who had just returned and was taking a shower, looked down and found that the word attack had appeared on the back of his hand. He said in surprise, "What is this? Attack?" Looking at the word imprint on the portrait, Jun Changshao was not surprised. After all, that guy's battle style was very aggressive. Sin self is the shield, stars is the attack. This is the most representative attack and defense among my disciples. Yi Xingchen's expression was very interesting. Because when the word attack appeared, his level also increased crazily. In the end, it stopped at the 6th rank, Wu Huang. He had increased by 3 whole levels. I'm taking a shower. I'm not doing anything. Why did I increase by 3 levels for no reason? After moving into the Lingyan Pavilion, Jun Changshao could give one of the system's functions to his disciples. At first, he wanted to give the Divine Weapon Pavilion to Yi Xingchen. However, considering his arrogant personality and obsession with cultivation, he decided to ignore it. During this period of time, he has contributed a lot to the sect. I can buy him an exclusive divine weapon. Jun Changshao opened the Divine Weapon Pavilion. After a careful selection, he locked his gaze on the divine weapon named Death of Li, Sacrifice to the Heavens. He then rubbed his chin and said, "This is quite suitable for Xingchen." Ding! The host has spent 10,000 contribution points and obtained Death Parting, Heaven Offering, X1. It has been transferred to the spatial ring. Ding! Contribution points, 600,007,0000. Chapter 1069. Yi Xingchen joined Lingshao Pavilion after Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and Lu Wancher. From the beginning, his merit points had reached the maximum in a short time. It could be seen that Anyo had provided a lot of help to the sect. Jun Changshao was very satisfied and immediately bought him an exclusive divine weapon. Shangli, Heaven's Sacrifice. Just from the name alone, one could feel that it was very awesome. However, with reference to the exotic weapons in the Divine Weapon Pavilion, the shape would probably be very funny. Stars. Jun Changshao sat in the main hall and said with a gratified face, "During this period of time, you have contributed a lot to the sect. I have decided to reward you with an exclusive divine weapon." Yi Xingchen's eyes suddenly lit up. Ever since he saw Li Qingyang's exclusive divine weapon, he did not hesitate to put down his dignity as a martial emperor and build bricks and walls in the stronghold of the falling star continent. Now, finally, the clouds parted and the moon could be seen. Whoosh! Jun Changshao waved his hand, and a stream of light appeared out of thin air and then fell in front of Yi Xingchen, saying, "This is called Shangli, Heaven's Sacrifice. From today onwards, it will be your exclusive divine weapon." Shangli, Heaven's Sacrifice. Anyo's eyes became brighter. However, when the stream of light dissipated and he saw the exclusive divine weapon, his expression suddenly became interesting. In his field of vision, there was an oversized wine jar with the words Shangli, Heaven's Sacrifice, engraved on it. There was a chain around the mouth, and the extra part seemed to be used to carry it. Wine jar. Wine jar. Yi Xingchen's mouth twitched violently. Stars. Jun Changshao said seriously, "Although your exclusive divine weapon is a bit weird, it is still very powerful." Shangli, Heaven's Sacrifice was a wine jar, at least stronger than Xiao Ziji's pot. However, what made Yi Xingchen collapse was that he would lose himself whenever he drank. Wasn't carrying the wine jar and fighting constantly reminding him of the embarrassing things he had done in the past? In fact, Jun Changshao chose the exclusive divine weapon in the shape of a wine jar because he hoped that he could overcome his inner demons and move forward with indomitable will. Patriarch. Yi Xingqian broke down and said, "Can I refuse?" Jun Changshao said, "Every disciple only has one exclusive divine weapon. If you don't want it, it's gone." After an intense internal struggle, Yi Xingqian raised his hand with great difficulty, grabbed the mouth of the wine jar, and lifted it up. Thinking about Xiao Ziji's cauldron, thinking about the Purple King's pink gloves, one wine jar was acceptable. At the very least, he looked like a hero. Swish! A stream of memories instantly flowed into his sea of consciousness. After a short while, Yi Xingqian understood the effects and the sure-kill skill. His dejected eyes lit up again. Although this was a wine jar, its real purpose was to hold wine. Oh, no, it was to take people's heads. That was right. Li Shang's sacrifice to the heavens was equivalent to the flying guillotine. When the user took out this weapon and threw it out, as long as it landed on the opponent's head, it would sever everything. Yi Xingqian had always liked to kill in one move. With this divine weapon that could take people's heads, it was clear that Jun Changshao did not choose this out of bad taste, but after careful consideration. Back of the mountain. It was drizzling, poetic and picturesque. Yi Xingqian stood proudly on a huge rock, carrying a large wine jar tied to a chain on his back. If he cut his hair short, matched it with smoky eyes and the word love carved on his forehead, he would definitely look amazing. Why is junior brother Yi carrying a large wine jar on his back? I heard that it's an exclusive divine weapon bestowed by the Patriarch. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others gathered together, their eyes fixed on Yi Xingqian. Brother Anyo. Hui looked at the proud figure from afar, a smile on her face. This ordinary girl who was engaged to Yi Xingqian had been cultivating ever since she joined the sect of all times. She had always been transparent so as not to disturb Yi Xingqian. However, she could hide herself forcefully, but she could never hide her concern for him. She would often hide in a corner and pay attention to him. Feelings could be intense, but they could also be as plain as water. Hui belonged to the latter. Because of brother Anyo's indifference to her, she only hoped to live with him in the sect of all times. She would be satisfied if she could see him occasionally. Whoosh! Yi Xingqian raised his right hand and gathered his spiritual energy. The Li Shang offering heaven's sword on his back flashed and flew out. Huff, 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 the wine jar was quickly selected. In the blink of an eye, it hung in front of a watermelon-sized rock and pressed its mouth down. It's so fast. If I hadn't released my spiritual thoughts, I wouldn't have been able to catch it. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji were surprised. Bang! Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. Yi Xingqian waved his right hand. The Li Shang offering heaven's sword spun and flew over. Then, he carried it on his back again. The stone that was previously covered had already shattered into pieces, turning into small pebbles. Damn! Li Fei said in shock, this isn't a wine jar. It's a hidden weapon. Whoosh! Yi Xingqian waved his hand again. The Li Shang offering heaven's sword flew out again. This time, it was slower. Everyone could see its trajectory with their naked eyes. However, they all opened their mouths because the wine jar was expanding infinitely in the air. Huff, huff, a sharp aura roared out. After a while, the wine jar that was 30 to 50 feet in size hung on a mountain peak in the distance like a black cloud. Then, it covered the ground with its mouth. Everyone's mouth twitched. The peak of the mountain was covered by a large wine jar. The scene was a bit strange. Boom! There was an explosion and rubble rolled down. When the Li Shang offering heaven's sword returned, it was stuck on Yi Xingqian's back. The peak of the mountain that was covered by it had completely collapsed. It could fly out at high speed and expand in size. This hidden weapon was incredible. Of course. Yi Xingqian only used it for testing. The targets were only rocks and mountain peaks, so it was hard to show its true power. Not bad, not bad. His eyes were filled with satisfaction. Although the Li Shang offering heaven sword form made him suffer, and he even inadvertently thought of sleeping in the toilet after getting drunk, he was still very satisfied because it was a one-hit kill. Wine. This hurdle. I will cross it. The scene changed. The Night Emperor was sitting at the dining table with a small cup of drunken dreams in front of him. The blood in his body was boiling, and there was a possibility that it would burst out at any moment. The Patriarch gave him a wine jar-type divine weapon. Now, he gave him a cup of wine. Was he trying to embarrass him? Sinful self, Xingqian. Jun Changshao said, when you went out, the sect recruited a winemaker. This wine was made by him. The other disciples have drunk it. You can try it too. Winemaker. Yi Xingqian frowned. He suddenly felt as if he had met his natural enemy. Patriarch. He folded his arms and said proudly, I have stopped drinking. Every time he drank, he was determined to stop drinking. And it was the kind that he swore. Even if it was wine in front of him, he, Yi Xingqian, would not drink it. This wine is called drunken dreams. Jun Changshao said, you won't get drunk after a sip. Instead, you will be full of energy. TSK, Yi Xingqian sneered. No matter what you say, I will adhere to my desire to stop drinking. Of course. Jun Changshao added, after drinking drunken dreams, it will stimulate the comprehension of the attributes of heaven and earth. It will last for an entire day. Xiao Ziji said in surprise, it's that magical. You can try. Yes. Xiao Ziji's alcohol tolerance was not bad, and his alcohol tolerance was not bad, so he was not afraid of drunken dreams. He immediately raised his cup and drank it until he felt that he had a better comprehension of the attributes of heaven and earth. He said in surprise, Patriarch, I will go to the spirit gathering array first. On the other hand, Yi Xingqian's expression became ferocious. After Xiao Ziji drank drunken dreams, the attributes of heaven and earth around him swarmed over. This meant that the wine really had the effect of increasing the absorption of spiritual energy. Stars. Jun Changshao said, if you don't drink it, give it to your fellow disciples. They will definitely be grateful for your selfless sharing. Yes, yes. Li Fei and Tian Qi appeared at the entrance of the canteen. They smiled with anticipation. Humph, Yi Xingqian raised his cup. Under their gazes, he drank drunken dreams. It was sweet and fragrant in the mouth. However, after the wine entered his stomach, the power of the alcohol rushed into his mind and completely occupied Night Emperor's mind. Then, he blacked out again. Damn it. After gradually waking up, Yi Xingqian held his head and said. When his memory returned, he realized that he had drunk wine. He hurriedly opened his eyes and looked around. A familiar environment, a familiar bed. That's right. His residence. Phew. Yi Xingqian heaved a sigh of relief and said to himself, thank goodness, thank goodness. Creak. He pushed open the door and went out. Li Qingyang happened to pass by the courtyard and whispered, Junior brother Yi, next time you drink too much, don't go to the sheep pen. I spent a lot of effort to pull you back. Boom boom boom. Yi Xingqian stood there in a daze. He was struck by lightning. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.